any good acting has behavior with it.
Nate, why? Why such bitterness? What have I done to you? Get out! You're no nephew of mine. As far as I'm concerned, you're as dead as that wretch Cermak.
You have to embellish the words with a certain amount of gravity. Because we're talking about things that are really important here, that are kind of secret. There's a natural kind of darkness when you talk about noir. You know, it's great. I love it.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination and the perhaps never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, moi, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm, of course, right here in the Robservatory, Robcasting at you. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 1102. It's like Chuck Woolery, 2 and 2. Not really. I was never on Love Connection, unlike my friend Dan Schweiger, who was on it 3 times. First of all, this is totally unrelated to our topic at hand, which isn't unusual for me on a show like this. I watched a movie that I'd been hearing about since Sundance 2025 that I was knocked out by. Victoria, who's a member of this channel, the Vicster as we like to call her, she had mentioned it. She said I'd really like the film. My friend Alvaro mentioned it as one of the great indie films of the 21st century, and I finally caught up with it yesterday. I got the Blu-ray, and that would be James Sweeney's Twinless. It caused kind of a stir at Sundance 2025 because the online portal where people could watch the Sundance movies, puerile as though we all may be, some people, of course, clipped out the love scenes between 2 guys and distributed them far and wide on the internet because that's what we do. But I have to say, James Sweeney, who also stars in the movie opposite Dylan O'Brien, who is absolutely wonderful in the film, they both are, it is just an incredible character study. And let me just say, I didn't know what this movie was about. I didn't look it up. I didn't read anything about it. All I knew was that it was called Twinless, and it caused a stir at Sundance 2025, and 2 people whose opinions I respect told me to watch it. That's the best way. If you don't know what this movie is and you don't read about it, just go in cold. I was absolutely delighted by this film. The performances were amazing. Aisling Franciosi, who played Lyanna Stark in Game of Thrones, is in it. And her character, I mean, I think we all want to meet a girl. Those who are interested in meeting girls, if you could meet a girl like her and her character in this film, what a delight she was. As I said, Dylan O'Brien and James Sweeney are their relationship is front and center of this film. Really terrific. So go catch up with Twinless if you want to watch a great piece of indie cinema. Really, what a satisfying film. I'm so happy that I own the movie. And I seeked out, actually, I asked to get a review copy of the film, and it's absolutely, excuse me, terrific movie. So check that out, Twinless. Now, this show is the conclusion of a trilogy of shows I've done, my last 2 shows, now this show, about Star Wars. Of course, celebrating the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Also, I can say that as many people know, I have an ongoing movie poster. I was able to acquire an amazing cache of movie posters from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little bit beyond, from the National Screen Service Corporation that used to publish all movie posters. And if you go to the YouTube store, Find Your Niche, underneath there's a sub-store, R&B's Imagination Connoisseurs. And throughout the summer, we're going to be dropping, and the condition of this material, 1 sheets, 3 sheets, inserts, half sheets, 6 sheets, which are 81 inches by 81 inches, but they're in 4 pieces, so you have to get them mounted. We dropped some Star Wars posters last week that are up for auction. 2 mint condition original Star Wars 1-sheet style A. We also have a style D 30 by 40 printed on heavy cardstock that's up for auction. We have a 40 by 60 of the Empire Strikes Back B sheet, an original Empire Gone with the Wind style poster, and other things. The science fiction and horror auctions are almost over, but then we have a lot of items. Most of the items are buy it now. This coming weekend, starting Friday, we have a James Bond drop to celebrate the release of the James Bond video game First Light. There's an original Live and Let Die 6-sheet, 81 inches by 81 inches. Now, of course, to display it, you really should get it dry mounted. You should have it mounted on linen. And it's cherry. It's uncirculated, never been used. It's amazing. I am hard-pressed to part with it. But that goes live about 6 o'clock Friday night. There's James Bond inserts, half sheets, 1 sheets, 3 sheets, 6 sheets. So check that out. And then to celebrate He-Man, we are going to drop fantasy posters, all kinds of different fantasy films, including original Superman the movie 1 sheets and 1 sheets from advances from Superman 2 and original 1 sheets from Superman 2 inserts, things like that. And we'll be dropping Hitchcock, Woody Allen, 60s classics, 70s classics. We have a lot of great stuff that we're going to be dropping all through the summer. So check that out. Find Your Niche, the store on eBay, 100%, by the way, eBay seller. Gabe, my compatriot on this, and my sub-store, R&B's Imagination Connoisseurs. Check it out. And by the way, if you do purchase something or win an auction, please send me a photograph of you with, if you're happy with it, I would assume. Send me a picture of it with you, because I want to make a scrapbook of people and send it to the gentleman who I got the items from. That would mean a lot to him, and it's fun to show if you want, just to show you with the item that you got. I love to see what interested people. So anyway, that said, I got to hand it to all of you. I love the audience for this show. I've been doing this show now. This is the 8th year. December will be the 8th year that I've been doing Robservations, and we're in season 9 right now. And I think we have one of the best audiences and the best communities on YouTube, and that is because all of you are thoughtful, and all of you are very interesting. And I mean, I guess you would have to be thoughtful to put up with this mug prattling on like a prat sometimes. But I want to thank you all for being here, because the interesting feedback, the letters I've been getting, the comments on the show, it's really heartening to see such a great fan community like you guys. And guys, girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies. It's great to have you all here and to have such thoughtful conversation. Because remember, every person you meet has a story to tell, right? And you all do, which is wonderful. So now that we've talked about, I got to tell you my journey into Star Wars and my thoughts on Return of the Jedi. And then we had the great Kevin Rubio on the other day to talk about what we all thought of the Mandalorian and Grogu. I kind of wanted to talk about the future of Star Wars, because we are on the cusp of its 50th anniversary. The Star Wars celebration is going to be here in Los Angeles. The Lucas Museum, which looks to be just incredible, is opening. And we have the Olympics as well. Where do we go? I think about, it's wild to me that when I was a kid, the things that mattered to me the most in terms of media. And look, I will say that I did have to go to Sunday school, Temple D. Hirsch Sinai, or as we used to call it, Temple D. Church, because it was definitely a Reform Jewish synagogue. But so I did that, and I was educated. I learned a lot, rightly or wrongly, about morality and humanity from movies. Now, somebody took me to task on that. Oh, everything you learned was from movies. No, I mean, I loved school. You know, when I was the kid, like I've told on this show before, my parents bought the World Book Encyclopedia for us because there used to be guys that would go door to door to sell encyclopedias, believe it or not. And it was my favorite thing. I loved the World Book Encyclopedia. At one point, I had a microscope, and I set up a little lab downstairs where I had my microscopes and all my slide making sets, and I always had stacks of the World Book Encyclopedia on my little table that was next to the washer and dryer, and I was looking at everything under the microscope and, you know, making slides of bugs and plucking wings off of insects, but not to, I mean, it was horrible, but to look at them under the microscope. I was very inquisitive. I really liked school. So I did not learn everything I know from movies. However, as I've said before, the best fiction is the most truthful. And I think storytelling, how have we conveyed human experience since the dawn of time, since we sat around campfires and we recounted the stories of how we hunted whatever we were eating at that moment. We told the tale to amuse your captain, no? I mean, that's how we learned. That's how we were able to experience storytelling. And what do you do like if you go to a therapist? You tell a therapist a story. You convey an incident or incidents via your experience of them and relate them to other people. So to me, the great movies are full of human truths, as is the best fiction, the best novels, the best stories, hell, the best poems, the best jokes, the best paintings, the best art is really reflections of how we think and how we feel. Now, what we have had to deal with, we have seen a tremendous paradigm shift over the last 30 years when it comes to movies especially. Because it used to be that studios were entities unto themselves. And yes, you know, the studios, I remember when Warner Brothers was a Kinney company, not Kinney Shoes, but a Kinney company. And of course, we've seen over the last 50 years, the studios have been purchased by different companies who tried to use them as various adjuncts of their core business. But when they were started by men, mavericks, who many of them Jewish immigrants who pushed out west and founded Hollywood and started to tell stories. I mean, it made sense because filmmaking really, actually the first feature film, Australia, you know, and the Kelly Gang. And then, of course, you had people like, you know, Sergei Eisenstein not creating it, but refining it, finding out that it was a science and art unto itself. Then you had the German expressionist filmmakers. You had the Weimar Republic and all the amazing things that were happening in Germany, and gave way to filmmakers like Fritz Lang or Murnau. And then in France, you Georges Méliès, and it was, you know, it was an explosion of the 20th century, and it really was an art form that belonged to the 20th century. And I was born in 1967. Yes, believe it or not, 67. I was born at the tail end of the first season of the airing of the original Star Trek. I was born 3 years after Twilight Zone originally went off the air. And I was born 2 years before the moon landing, which happened, of course, on July 20th, 1969. And yes, we did go to the moon 6 times, and we landed there. We went more, but we landed 6 times. So, wait, was it more than 6 times? Maybe. No, because we didn't land, I think it was 6 times, maybe. We didn't land with Apollo 13, obviously. But, so movies have mattered to me, and I think mattered to all of us, and they are truly the art form of my life. And because of when I was born, you can have a holistic understanding. Like when I look at paintings over the centuries, going from it's hard to even comprehend. And I took some art history courses in college, but still, there was so much to wrap your head around. Whereas movies, I mean, I've been alive for almost half of cinema history, and I got to participate in it. And of course, Star Wars turning 50 next year is a big part of that, because for me, as I explained, it's such a formative moment in my own life, because it was a huge leap ahead in terms of what was possible for science fiction, fantasy, and horror filmmaking, in terms of the technology made it available, that Hollywood made available images that we could never see before. And post Star Wars, it didn't take very long. I mean, post Star Wars, I think that, to me, because it took 2 years to see The Secret of Star Wars and the success of Star Wars, and to have it trickle down, and we didn't really get the first examples of what a post Star Wars world would look like until 1979, where we got things like The Black Hole and, of course, Alien and Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Those were films that were definitely greenlit and made possible because of Star Wars' success. And while I would say Alien is obviously close to being a perfect movie, Star Trek: The Motion Picture has still to this day my favorite Star Trek movie, and it's only grown in stature with the 4K, the final 4K director's edition of the film. And you go back and you watch The Black Hole, and now at the time, not a great movie, kind of a retelling of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But if you go back and you watch it now, it's kind of wacky, especially in the wake of Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. But still, there's things in it where you look at it and go, huh, wow, okay. I don't understand where the explosive decompression went when the Cygnus was breached by a giant asteroid that rolls down the center of it. But who knows? I don't. But anyway, what has happened, though, is our entire culture of film, the studios themselves, for the most part, have been bought by much larger publicly held concerns. And business, where Hollywood was always kind of this push-pull between commerce and art, because the people that were making movies wanted to make movies. I mean, yes, there was always, did people want to get rich and get paid? Sure. But the level of success that you would ever achieve making movies was nowhere near television. When television, I mean, the people that, if you look at how much money Aaron Spelling had, very few filmmakers themselves could make that much money. So people that worked in motion pictures, for the most part, they loved the medium they worked in. And what happened was, and it was pretty much an American business, and we were making movies for the domestic audience. Well, over the last 50 years, that has changed, obviously, especially over the last 30. Movie making is truly a global enterprise, and the studios have to think when they greenlight a movie, and also the costs of making movies has, I mean, the Mandalorian and Grogu has a reported budget of $165 million. Well, in the 50 years, I mean, Star Wars cost, what, 11? Empire, 25 and change, maybe? And you see where filmmaking has gone. It's so expensive now, the only way you can justify its cost is if you release it internationally, and if a movie makes $500 million. So that immediately limits the kind of movies that you can make. The movie Twinless that I'm talking about, I don't know what the budget was, but it wasn't much. And the thing is, that movie has a limited scope, limited audience, but it wasn't expected to make $50 million or $100 million. Cory Barker's Obsession might make $100 million. I would love to see a whole bunch of YouTubers cutting their teeth making horror movies for less than $1 million, and they're good enough to be theatrically released. I'm looking forward tomorrow. Well, I'm not seeing it tomorrow. I'm seeing it Friday to see Backrooms. Something that was now, I don't know if it's going to be an IP. I guess it is an IP, but it's literally a film series that was born out of one still photograph that was published on the internet. That was the basis of what has now become an IP, an A24 movie. Started with a photograph. And it's basically open source, which is really interesting. There's a few open source videos about the open source nature of this and how was Kane allowed to be able to make this movie in the first place. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, Star Wars. I've got a few articles that I want to read to set the stage of what I was thinking about this whole topic, because I think about Star Wars as much as I think about the Roman Empire, which is to say a lot. The first article I want to read is kind of interesting in that, I always try and find interesting stuff. I always hunt and peck. And this first article comes from the Austin American Statesman from Austin, Texas. And it's by Joe Gross, and it was published December 19th, 2019. I've spent 40 years thinking about Star Wars. Here are 40 thoughts. Here's a picture. People maintain their places in line awaiting the midnight premiere of The Empire Strikes Back, the sequel to Star Wars on May 21st, 1980. Some of the fans expected to be in line as 36 hours in order to be among the first in the nation to see the movie. And here we go. Now, these are 40 thoughts the author had. 1980, suburban Maryland. Time magazine is sitting on my grandmother's table. Darth Vader is on the cover, which is weird for Time given that Darth Vader is not a real person. The piece on The Empire Strikes Back. I'm not yet 6 years old. It looks scary, I say, flipping the pages. I have a vague idea of what Star Wars is, thanks to some impressive after-school programming. I'm a much bigger fan of Star Blazers. Just Google it, or as if you want to know, Space Battleship Yamato, which, by the way, on Crunchyroll, you can see the remake. If you don't know what Star Blazers is, shame on you. But it was the Americanized version of Space Battleship Yamato, which was a Japanese animated series that began in 1974, but it was aired, the first 2 seasons were aired on American television in the late 70s. It's incredible. And they started to reboot it in 2012. Space Battleship Yamato 2199, there was 2202, 2205, and now 3199 Rebel. If you want to watch great space opera, great science fiction, watch Star Blazers, which, by the way, or Space Battleship Yamato, it predated Star Wars. And people think that IQ-9, the robot, is based on R2-D2. It was the opposite. Anyway, it looks scary, I say, flipping through the pages. I have a vague idea of what Star Wars is, thanks to some impressive after-school programming. I'm a much bigger fan of Star Blazers. Just Google it, which in retrospect is far scarier. I think you would like it, my grandmother says. I see photos of a massive starship, a robot, and 2 humans in what looks like the cockpit of another ship. And the scary guy from the cover reaching out to a broken, crying person on the edge of what looks like a very long fall down a very large shaft of some sort. These people are a total mystery. I have absolutely no idea what is going on. It is all potential energy. I am hooked. 2019. I'm sitting in a theater in North Austin getting ready to see Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, supposedly the end of a now 9-part saga. In the past 5 years, I've seen and experienced more on-screen Star Wars material than in the previous 30. It is beginning to feel like a lot. This is like Dr. Manhattan. 1981. I tear off the wrapping paper. It is the finest moment of Christmas morning. The proverbial big present. It's a snowspeeder, it's a snowspeeder, it's a snowspeeder. It's my Red Ryder BB gun, as it were. It's the best Christmas present I will ever receive. By the way, that toy was dope because it was accurate to scale. 1992. Not everyone I become friends with in college and right after is a Star Wars fan. But that, and a fondness for punk rock and hip-hop, is a pretty good barometer for whom I would see eye to eye with or not. As I go to more punk shows, think bands that open for Fugazi, I see more references to Star Wars in more songs, on more stickers, on more instrument cases and well-worn amps. Star Wars is common coin. 1997. Sometimes battle lines are drawn. At a big dinner one night at Albi's, a Salvadoran place beloved by Discord Records types, I expressed my lack of fondness for many, many things about Return of the Jedi. The guitarist in a band I like goes dead silent. He's never all that pleasant to me again. Well, to be fair, I always hated his guitar tone. 1984 or so. My family gets its first VCR. My aunt tapes Star Wars off cable. I watch it roughly a kabillion times. I have an audio adaptation on vinyl. I read the novelization. 1999, May 19th. A friend has scored tickets for a bunch of us to see Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We hang out in line like we're waiting for results from a doctor. The trailers have been somewhat promising, but only somewhat. First, the crawl. Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. Okay. Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have a bad feeling about this. Wait, George Lucas is burning off the franchise's signature line this early? Like, immediately? Qui-Gon Jinn. I don't sense anything. Obi-Wan. It's not about the mission, Master. It's something elsewhere, elusive. Qui-Gon. Don't center on your anxieties, Obi-Wan. Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs. Obi-Wan. But Master Yoda says I should be mindful of the future. Qui-Gon. But not at the expense of the moment. Be mindful of the living force, my young Padawan. Oh, God. Oh, God. This is terrible writing. The sinking feeling in the theater is almost tangible. A leaden realization that this is probably going to be mediocre at best, terrible at worst. And then the Trade Federation echoing Yellow Peril tropes, and Jar Jar Binks, and the damn midichlorians, proof that Jedi are born and not made. The movie ends. My pals and I just kind of look at each other in mild shock, and not a little bit of shame. Why did we just assume this would be good? The preview poster remains fantastic. 2015. It's October. The Millennium Falcon roars into view in the first trailer for Star Wars The Force Awakens. The flick seems both familiar and new. A young person is on a desert planet, a villain clad in black robes, Han Solo saying, "We're home." Fans likely feel the same way. And yet, there is nothing that seems risky or out of place. This is definitely a movie by a corporation. 1984. The Playground Star Wars figure trade is vigorous. 1984. The Playground Star Wars figure trade is vigorous and occasionally cutthroat. I score a blue snaggletooth off a friend. It remains the best business deal I have ever made. I have no idea where Big Blue is now. What he is referring to is the Sears and Roebuck Company would offer exclusives, and they offered a Mos Eisley Cantina exclusive. And they had various versions of the Cantina aliens, and the blue snaggletooth was only available with that set and became quite rare. My ultimate goal, which I eventually reach, is a set of bounty hunters. Why? Because they have the most narrative potential. Except for Boba Fett, we see them once and never again. The bounty hunters can do or be anything, can stand for anything. They are pure imagination fuel. And by the way, for those of you who don't know what happened to IG-88, read Tales of the Bounty Hunters, because it's still... I was pulling for old IG-88. He almost got there. Almost. What movie would that have been? 2019. Several decades later, Jon Favreau essentially will acknowledge this in Disney Plus's TV show The Mandalorian, a.k.a. here is my fan fiction about Boba Fett if he hadn't died. And it's also pretty much Lone Wolf and Cub. 1999. My closest Star Wars friend and I literally schedule a phone call to complain about The Phantom Menace. The pros? Great lightsaber battle. This is the first time in the movies when we see what they should look like. Not the old man shuggle of Obi-Wan and Vader or the slow burn drama of Luke and Vader, but fast and skilled. And the shot of Qui-Gon praying between rounds with Darth Maul is inspired, reminding the viewer that a Jedi is a faith and a worldview and a discipline. Cons, pretty much everything else. From Anakin Skywalker as evil Jesus to poor Jake Lloyd as young Anakin, to the terrible dialogue, to the endless pod race, to the fucking midichlorians. The pod race rules. And that game was great too. Where's the remastered pod racer game. Hello, PlayStation 5, pod racer, bring that shit back. I played it incessantly. 2015, Kylo Ren, played by Adam Driver, is a Star Wars character for the meme and Twitter age. His performance rankles when I first see it, and the emo Kylo Ren Twitter account remains hilarious. But it dawns on me during The Last Jedi, you could drop him into any movie and he would make sense. 2002, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones is almost unwatchable, save for a few lightsaber fights. Yes, including the one with the hilariously bonkers Yoda versus Christopher Lee, wherein Yoda is bouncing like a Super Ball. Sometime in the 80s, of course, I read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the first Star Wars sequel novel with an original story. Of course, I read the Han Solo books. Little kids like to categorize things, and I become mildly obsessed with canon. This is reinforced by A Guide to the Star Wars Universe by Raymond L. Velasco. I received this as a Christmas gift in 84, 85, from a family friend, a lawyer who is also a giant Star Wars nerd. It's easily the second greatest Star Wars gift I've ever gotten. I read it until it falls apart. I tape it up. For a while there, I have it on me constantly. It has very specific things it calls canon. Movies, novelizations, radio shows, early tie-in novels, and things it does not. The Marvel Comics adaptations. 1991. Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn appears in bookstores, about the time people start calling these secondary texts the Star Wars Expanded Universe. By this time, I'm spending all of my thoughts and time on such, and I'm spending all of my thoughts and time and such on popular and unpopular music. This is someone else's Star Wars. 2017. Fans have absolutely no idea how to feel about Rian Johnson's Star Wars: The Last Jedi. In it, he deliberately ignores or actively subverts all of the tropes about destiny and family, much to Mark Hamill's chagrin. Luke is seen as a crank living by himself on an ancient island. Kylo Ren tells Rey, the new trilogy's heroine, that she comes from nothing rather than being the heir to a galactic dynasty. People get salty about it. I celebrate its relative oddness compared to recent Star Wars fare. Luke drinking green milk from an animal. This is as weird as Star Wars gets in the 2010s. 2012. George Lucas sells Star Wars Lock, Stock, and Outer Rim to Disney. It sets them back about $4 billion, which seems like a lot at the time. Turns out to be a bargain. I go to the Circuit of the Americas inaugural Formula One U.S. Grand Prix. Lucas, famously a car and racing nerd, is rumored to be there. I do not run into him. Later, Disney declares that everything in the expanded universe is non-canonical. This is, of course, their right, but it can't help but feel like an insult. 2002. With no primary texts forthcoming between Jedi and Phantom Menace, it was arguably up to the faithful longtime fans to become curators of the mythos, to sustain it both through their financial investment in all the secondary texts, the EU material, and participating in folk activity like fan fiction or amateur digital cinema. Lucas's return as an omnipotent author, therefore, puts him in the ironic position of reclaiming control over an empire, stamping his own vision of the Star Wars universe. Will Brooker using the Force creative community and Star Wars fans. 2019. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. Post-Disney Lucasfilm executive Kathleen Kennedy in an interview. 1977, Luke to Obi-Wan. You fought in the Clone Wars? Is there any other phrase more pregnant with potential than the words Clone Wars? There wasn't a dork in the galaxy who didn't spend time wondering what the hell the Clone Wars were. Did the Jedi fight clones? Was it about the ethics of cloning? Instead, what we got was an army of clones fighting an army of robots. Okay. 1985. Being a nerd pre-internet meant a lot of saying to your friends, "Hey, do you remember this weird thing I may have dreamed up?" For me and my pals, the Crown Prince, Queen something of these is a special issue of a magazine called Star Blazer, an extremely sketchy and sleazy knockoff of a Star Trek fan magazine, Starlog, and unrelated to the cartoon Star Blazers that traded in mere speculation. I ran into one that blew my tiny mind at a drugstore in my hometown. The cover was a picture of Darth Vader's helmet with some weird robot skull underneath. Underneath the Star Blazer special logo were the words Star Wars 4, George Lucas's great new film. Note that not one word of this headline is true other than spelling Lucas's name correctly. Also on the cover, Darth Vader, how he became the Prince of Evil, more machine than man. In the lower right-hand corner was C-movie queen Sybil Danning, by the way, who starred in Battle Beyond the Stars, whom the magazine swore was playing a witch who seduced Anakin to the dark side. The magazine also swore Hamill was going to play Anakin. Years later, I confirmed with college friends that yes, everyone remembered this issue, and yes, everyone thought they dreamed it up. This was how fandom worked, through rumor and conjecture and swearing you saw this one thing one time, and anonymous writers making things up got into print. But let me tell you, a Star Wars movie in which Anakin gets seduced by a Sith witch played by Sybil Danning, sounds freaking fantastic. 2019. There's a whole podcast episode devoted to this insanity. Everyone on the episode thought they had imagined it too. 1977. Marvel Comics gets on the Star Wars bandwagon really early. The first 6 issues of the series are an adaptation of the first movie. After that, well, Marvel had to keep putting a comic out, and The Empire Strikes Back was years away, so issues number 7 through 38 were kind of winging it. This resulted in some rip-roaring space opera, including a large humanoid with a green rabbit head named Jackson. 2019, or Jackson. 2019, if he wants to warm the hearts of fans forever, Jon Favreau will put Jackson in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. 1986. The Marvel comic ends in 1986, which turned out to be one of the most innovative years in the history of American comics. This feels like a tiny nadir for this for-profit mythos. 2005, Revenge of the Sith, in which Anakin Skywalker kills a bunch of children and loses huge on a lava planet. Obi-Wan leaves before making sure Anakin is dead, and Darth Vader lets out a big "No!" after finding out his wife died of a broken heart, is released. There's nothing about this movie that isn't weirdly depressing. 1997. The original trilogy special editions arrive, re-releases of the old films, with some changes made, both minor and major. Greedo shoots first. I can feel my jaw drop, physically drop. This really should let us know what was coming with the prequels. 1979 through 84. The Star Wars newspaper comic strip is not particularly well remembered, but the creative team featured some giants. Writers like Archie Goodwin and Steve Gerber, artists like Al Williamson, Russ Manning, and Alfredo Akela, just to name a few. It's fun stuff, gorgeous to look at. It has since been compiled into 3 lovely volumes. 2015. I'm standing outside a theater in North Austin, waiting with a handful of critics, mostly dorky, to see The Force Awakens. Nobody is saying anything. Nobody really wants to admit how excited a bunch of 40-somethings are for this thing. 1983. Return of the Jedi. My dad and I see it at Tyson's Corner, then merely a large shopping mall in the name for a Washington, D.C. suburb. In 2019, the designation for one of the most significant tech corridors on the East Coast. I've never tried harder to learn everything about a movie before I see it. I talk to friends. I flip through magazines. Whining about spoilers is for nerds. Just shoot the new Star Wars info straight into my brain, baby. Even then, the Ewoks were kind of crap, and watching now, it's clear Harrison Ford would rather be anywhere else, and Carrie Fisher, God rest her brilliant soul, might actually be somewhere else. 2015, of course, there are problems with The Force Awakens, and Ford still looks unhappy to be there, but that rush is back, even Disney-fied. It's back. 2016, the first standalone non-Skywalker Star Wars movie, Rogue One, works pretty well. From a straight war movie plot to some decent fight scenes to Darth Vader absolutely wrecking dudes. 2016, the CG'd Grand Moff Tarkin and Leia, though, probably were mistakes. 1982, a friend's father has recorded the entire Star Wars NPR radio drama straight off the radio. It proves mesmerizing, even with some cast replacements. Brock Peters as Darth Vader, Perry King as Han Solo, someone named Anne Sachs as Leia. The story starts before the movie. Writer Brian Daley gifted Leia with a great scene where she must escort an Imperial officer around Alderaan, while Daley also expands the Imperial torture droid scene in a psychologically brutal manner. The other two original trilogy films were made into radio dramas, a format all but dead for decades that has made a quiet comeback in the podcast era. With extremely good production values and top-flight acting, it is a must for all Star Wars nerds. 2018, the second standalone Star Wars movie, Solo, does not work well. 1990, I'm sitting in my local comic book shop in Falls Church, Virginia. I've been a 3 times a week customer for about 4 to 5 years at this point. I'm yakking with a clerk, an older hippie-ish gen who chain smokes Camels. Later, stale smoke plus aging paperbacks will become my favorite smell in the world. What you have to understand is that nobody had ever seen anything like that opening shot before, he says. There's a little starship and laser bolts, and then the ship chasing it comes into frame and just keeps going. 1983, we're at a Toys R Us. I spot a Star Wars LP called Rebel Mission to Ord Mantell, which to this dork was very obviously supposed to be about the bounty hunter on Ord Mantell that Han mentions in Empire Strikes Back. I bought it with my own money and played it until it was flat. I'm telling you, Disney, the Star Wars audio drama is dope. 1977. At its best, Star Wars is about firing the imagination. The first movie explained so little. It constantly demanded that you look at it and think, who is that guy? What is that planet? Is a parsec a unit of time or space or both? As much as I love the work of legendary conceptual artist Ralph McQuarrie, my favorite piece of Star Wars art is a painting by a guy named John Berkey. Cities in Flight, baby. He was a well-known sci-fi artist, but he was commissioned to do a poster without knowing much about the plot, which means there are some inaccuracies. A few Millennium Falcons, for example. I love this because it is wrong, and I love this because it is weird. His brushstrokes have a cloudy, almost fog-like quality. Fog contains a mystery. You don't completely know what's behind it. Those ships are flying into the unknown, into potential. 2019, my kids, who have not had all that much interest in Star Wars, get into The Mandalorian. I can't blame them. It's all potential. 1978 summer. I'm about 4. We drive to the local movie theater. I look at the marquee and I ask, what's Star Wars? And that's from Joe Gross, from an Austin newspaper. I really liked that article because I think it captures what it was like to be a Star Wars fan throughout your life. Certainly I related to it. And the interesting thing about Star Wars overall, in the almost 50 years that we've had it, is it's come to mean so many different things to so many different people. It like I get into it on Chris Gore's Versus show with Angry Badger. Angry Badger's vision of Star Wars in his mind is very different than mine. And we get into it. But in his mind, when he talks about Star Wars, it's always from the inside of the Star Wars mythology, which I appreciate because he knows a great deal about it. He's a true through and through Star Wars fan. I can't help Look, I am a canonista. I'm a canon pornographer. I am an adherent to canon. I love the internal canon of fantasy universes. First and foremost, the Star Trek universe. Tolkien. I mean, there was no better canon pornographer than Professor Tolkien. I mean, if you want to wrap your head around the minutia of those worlds, Tolkien was the man. There is Modesty, who is a member of my channel. She's a woman from Europe. She knows more about George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones mythology than anyone I know. She is a total canonista. And if you want to have Modesty Cortez is, I mean, frankly, I wish I'd met her as a young man. I probably would have married her. I mean, she knows more about Game of Thrones. She's very interesting. But she's, I'm sure, a canonista as well. And I've always identified with people like that. But for me, I was very much into Star Wars because for my young life, I mean, look, the Ewok movies, the Ewok Adventure, Caravan of Courage, not for me. The droids in the Ewok TV series, no. I mean, for me, Star Wars, Empire, Jedi, I did consider the early novels, the Han Solo trilogy, the Lando Calrissian trilogy, and Splinter of the Mind's Eye, because there's nothing to contradict those books. Why couldn't they have happened? In the movies, if you think about it, we've only met the Star Wars characters for just a couple of days. Although I maintain, which people never quite understand, that Empire Strikes Back takes place over months. Everyone thinks that like Luke is on Dagobah for a couple of days training. No. And how long without hyperdrive did it take the Millennium Falcon to get to Bespin? A long time. So there's a lot more going on. It's not just 3 days. But anyway, is that your headcanon? But Star Wars was very, it lived in my mind. I thought about it a lot. And I'll tell you something. He makes the article, the author talks about finding, there was lots of knockoff science fiction magazines, not just the one he was talking about. There were some that were very good, like Fantastic Films and Questar, very highbrow, high production value magazines. But there was also, I remember I had a magazine, I don't remember the name of it, that went deep, deep, deep into Star Wars lore. And it was, they talked about, there's Ben Kenobi and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, they were convinced that Obi-Wan was actually a clone designation, OB1. And that was, he was grown in a vat. And that was, so Ben Kenobi, he took a human name, but his designation was Obi-Wan or Obi-Wan. I was totally convinced I was like, that's got to be real. That sounds great. And of course, the idea of the Clone Wars, in my mind, what people forget is there was a lot of talk about cloning in the 70s. There was a movie that was totally ripped off by Michael Bay. Everyone says The Island is a ripoff of Logan's Run. But no, there was a movie that came out called Parts, the Clonus Horror, late 70s. I used to have a one-sheet for it, but I sold it. Not great, but interesting. And then, of course, the idea of eugenics, controlled genetics, Khan Noonien Singh in Star Trek, obviously comes from the episode Space Seed. In the Star Trek universe, probably somewhere at the end of World War II, scientists decided to mess around with the human genome, and they created the genetic Superman that captured a quarter of the world, which is why Star Trek writers, I, as a little kid, never thought that our world was somehow like the Star Trek universe. I knew it was a divergent timeline from the very beginning, even as a little kid. But anyway, in Star Trek, the genetic Superman rose to power, and they seized control. And Khan Noonien Singh at one point ran a quarter of the world. And Kirk, Scotty, and McCoy admired him because he wasn't some despot. He wasn't killing his population and all of that. And of course, you find out that the scientists forgot one thing about superior human beings, that superior abilities breed superior ambition. They hadn't counted on that, like the tech bros today. They hadn't counted on where this technology is going to take us, except in their own minds and what they want it to be. But what they want it to be is not what's going to wind up, because they didn't watch enough science fiction movies, apparently. But anyway, that was always something in my mind. The Clone Wars cloning and genetic engineering was always kind of the same to me, and they're just variations on a theme. And so I was already familiar with those terms. So I thought the Clone Wars were going to be a combination of the idea in space. And there was a lot of ideas in science fiction, genetically enhanced humans. This was not something that was new. And in my mind, having started to read a lot of science fiction, I understood. So the Clone Wars were probably, genetically enhanced beings that tried to seize power somewhere, and the regular people had to go after or go to war with them. In my mind, that's what it was. And look, I understand what it became is that George Lucas didn't want to have a lot of killing going on, but he was stuck. He had to back into this idea. Well, what are the Clone Wars? You can't even clones are, and it's so funny because they made the clones all one dude. And by doing that, it means they're all disposable. I mean, obviously, then they would humanize the clones and all that. But again, if you really think about it, you can see that George Lucas himself was grappling with these very ideas that he was throwing out willy-nilly. It made Star Wars much more interesting. What were the Clone Wars? We didn't know. We hadn't seen them. What did it all mean? And then when he had the realization that, now I have to show an apocalyptic war with sentient beings killing each other. Well, that's why he decided to make it against robots. At least that's what I think. Because the same way that Han Solo in his mind, I've realized that I don't think he thought he was making a kid's movie from the beginning. Maybe he thought he was making a movie that would appeal to kids. But that's why he had to have Greedo shoot first. Because if he didn't, Han Solo was a murderer. Now, I understand that because he became a father. I think that's wrong. I think the Western tropes, Greedo threatened Solo's life. All bets are off. And you know what? He's a Rhodian. When have they ever been any good? Kill them all. That's what I say. I'm kidding. But, you can see how people's thought process, Steven Spielberg had that when he was able to re-release E.T. and digitally alter it so there weren't people with guns threatening kids. But this has been the problem with thinking for children in the latter half of the 20th century and the 21st century. Somewhere, we idiots got the idea that we have to protect children from the realities of the world. I mean, it's so bizarre to me that happened. And like government agents, we're just going to carry walkie-talkies. Thankfully, in the case of E.T., cooler heads prevailed. And Spielberg made sure that both versions were available. Now, I'd like to read an article from Arts. First of all, let me see if I want to check in on you guys and see if anybody's saying things. People are saying things. Brendan Lucas says, I think Stargate started off mediocre. So yes. Brendan Lucas goes on to say, really enjoying the lack of flirting, confidence, and swagger in the new James Bond game. The AI versus human story is something I've never seen before. Oh, are you liking it? I can't wait to start playing it. Dr. Fauci's pardoned prison butt says, Star Wars is done because Star Wars is a 6-episode family soap opera about the Skywalker family with the universe as the backdrop. The story is over. Techniques 1 has become a PGS member, and he's now a PGS hero. Or they are, or she is. I don't mean to, I don't know. Your name's Techniques 1. That's a cool name. Brendan Lucas goes on to say, I like how this writer always makes a stand. He actively states unpopular opinions and never aligns with what he assumes is the virtuous position. I love it, right? That's why I loved that article. Brendan Lucas says, 2036, the article hasn't ended yet. Is that true? Did I not get to 2036? Austin 360. No, I think it ends. I don't think that he said 2036. But anyway, maybe it's true. I don't know. But this next article is an article from Ars Technica that I was going to read the other night that I ended up not reading that I wanted to share. And here it is. It is a review of The Mandalorian and Grogu. And it's by Jennifer Quillette. and it was it was published on May 22nd, 2026 in Ars Technica. This is not the way. The Mandalorian in Grogu is fine. The plot is predictable. The fight scenes are meh, but you can't beat the charm of that little green Grogu. Hopes were arguably high for The Mandalorian and Grogu, director Jon Favreau's big screen offshoot of the popular Disney Plus series The Mandalorian. After all, there hasn't been a new film in the Star Wars franchise since 2019's The Rise of Skywalker wrapped up the 3 trilogies that make up the so-called Skywalker saga. The new film is fine. It's an average Star Wars outing, which, by the way, I never thought when I was a kid I would ever hear anyone say average Star Wars outing, as if Star Wars could ever be average. And it will give families a solid Memorial Day weekend entertainment option. It's just not the spectacular home run that might have helped launch the flagging franchise into an exciting new era. And diehard Star Wars fans hoping for more are probably going to be disappointed. Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, won viewers' hearts from the moment he first appeared on screen in the first season of The Mandalorian. And the relationship between the little green creature and his father figure bounty hunter, the titular Mandalorian, Din Djarin, has only gotten stronger. With the 2023 Hollywood strikes delaying production on Season 4 of the series, Favreau got the green light to make this spin-off film. Mando and Grogu, as his apprentice, are hunting down the scattered remnants of Imperial warlords on behalf of the New Republic. Taking orders from Sigourney Weaver's Colonel Ward, a former pilot with the Rebel Alliance, these missions tend to get messy, with Mando being Mando. Ward really wants the warlords alive to get useful intelligence from them, but they understandably don't like to come quietly, so sometimes, well, they die with their henchmen. Can't be helped. After Mando takes out his latest target, a disappointed Ward offers him a new mission, tracking down Rhoda the Hutt, son of the late Jabba, on behalf of the Hutt twins, who took over Jabba's criminal enterprise. In turn, the twins will provide crucial information on the whereabouts of an elusive Empire warlord named Coin. Mando accepts, mostly because Ward offers him a newly refurbished Razor Crest-like ship, just like his old one that blew up at the end of Season 2. Here are some pictures. Little animation tie-in. Rhoda, it turns out, has become a fan-favorite gladiator on the planet, I hate to say it, Shakari, but it is Shakari. For you Star Trek fans, you know what that is. It doesn't want to go back home to Nal Hutta, as he's convinced the twins will have him killed to cement their power. Complications ensue and things start to get messy. You don't want to get on the wrong side of the Hutt twins, as Mando soon learns to his peril. The various trailers were thin on plot details, and now it's clear why. There isn't much of a plot. Favreau has said that he came up with a new story rather than the one he'd planned for The Mandalorian Season 4 because of the switch from a streaming series to a theatrical film. But things still feel pretty episodic. The film is largely compromised by a series of side missions in service to a larger arc. There's some space travel, a fight scene with a cute Grogu moment, a victory and another cute Grogu moment, and then it's on to the next mission. Rinse and repeat. It's all very well-trodden ground with familiar beats happening at the expected times. Even the fight scenes are kind of meh. The dialogue in Star Wars films has always been notoriously wooden and uninspired, and The Mandalorian and Grogu is no exception. Good actors can salvage such lines, and Pedro Pascal is a very good actor, but it's much harder when your character wears a helmet the entire time and can't really emote. Embo. We didn't even get to really meet Embo. Doesn't have much of a character. Otherwise, we've mostly got stunt casting as fan service. We love Weaver, but she's utterly wasted here. It's nice to see Embo the bounty hunter from the Clone Wars in his live-action debut, and the return of Zeb, voiced by Steve Blum, plus the Hutt family characters from the Book of Boba Fett, but casual moviegoers will neither know their history nor care. Bonus. Look closely in the climactic battle scene and you'll spot several directors of Mandalorian episodes and Lucasfilm president and CCO Dave Filoni, the latter reprising his role as Trapper Wolf, a New Republic X-Wing pilot. All that said, there's no denying that Grogu's antics are pretty cute, and the little green puppet pretty much carries the entire film. Grogu partnering with the tiny Anzellans to rescue the kidnapped Mando is tailor-made for merchandising. The strongest element is the quietest. Mando collapses from a poisonous bite from a dragon snake in the Nal Hutta swamps, sacrificing himself so Grogu can escape. Grogu sticks around instead, building a shelter, finding food, and nursing his father figure back to health. It's a key turning point in their relationship and the only genuine emotional beat in the entire film. I don't know if we'll ever get that postponed fourth season of The Mandalorian. Box office projections indicate that The Mandalorian and Grogu is tracking even lower than 2018 Solo, although things might pick up over the holiday weekend. If so, the character dynamics will likely change considerably, and hopefully the series can recover some of that Star Wars magic that is so sadly absent here. That was from Jennifer, not Quillette, Olet. I think that's how you pronounce her name. So thank you for that. Now, here's if someone asked me about, okay, we've decided we're gonna make a Mandalorian and Grogu movie. We're gonna tell a story that we haven't told before, and we're gonna bring these characters to the big screen. And I ask this question of you who are watching right now. What would be your first impulse? Given what we've seen of the character, what kind of a story? Now, obviously, it's like Die Hard on a ship or Blood, whatever. But everyone has a story to equate. My whole thing with what was wrong with The Mandalorian and Grogu is that we should have seen The Mandalorian and Grogu face situations or things that we've never seen before. And whatever's going on should have to directly affect them. See, they were just doing the bidding of Sigourney Weaver. Some people have said to me, well, Rob, you like James Bond movies all the time, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I freely admit about half of the James Bond movies are good, and a small fraction of them are truly great. But the thing about James Bond movies is Bond was always going after a new villain, but he was globetrotting, and I got to see parts of the world that I'd never seen before. And even though the Bond formula was pretty consistent throughout films, there was enough differences in them that it made them interesting to watch. Now, with The Mandalorian and Grogu, it's a Star Wars movie. So I would have asked myself, who is the Mandalorian and what don't we know about him? We could create any backstory that we wanted about the Mandalorian, something we didn't know. Okay, we know he's a Mandalorian, but let's remove that part of it. People have lots of things that happen in their past, and lots of stories are born out of that. What is something the Mandalorian has always wanted but has never done? So in order to tell a great story, in my mind, you have to show us, the first thing that's incumbent upon you as a storyteller is to give us a reason to go see a Mandalorian movie on the big screen. What is it you are going to do that's different than what you've done for 3 seasons of TV? What are you going to do to work the paradigm of a motion picture? One story that fits into basically 2 hours, and how is that going to be different? So you're giving an audience, there must be an intellectual reason beyond seeing The Mandalorian and Grogu. We cannot just skate by on the fact that these characters are Star Wars characters. There has to be an intellectual or a hook, something that makes you go, oh, I've got to see that. That's interesting. Something that reaches out and grabs you. I would say that when Die Hard 3 came out, Die Hard with a Vengeance, one of the really interesting things about that movie is that we had seen 2 previous Die Hard movies where McClane was either cooped up in a building or cooped up at the airport. Now he's not cooped up. Now he's got all of New York, and he has a sidekick worthy of him, Sam Jackson. So already there's a crazy story that's going to take place in New York City. That becomes a hook. That's something we haven't seen in the previous 2 Die Hard movies. We know the action's going to be there. We know that we've got, Hans Gruber's brother Simon calling the shots. So immediately when you see the trailer for a movie like Die Hard with a Vengeance, you're going, oh, this is different enough. We like John McClane. We know that Mayhem follows him. Big budget, large scale, widescreen, anamorphic fucking mayhem. We know we're going to get that. But we ain't never seen it in a city like New York before. We don't see Bonwood tellers blown up every day. So immediately, the audience, you see the trailer for that movie or you hear about that movie, and it immediately creates something in your mind where you're like, yeah, I got to see that. Even though you know the character, you haven't seen that character do that before. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Suddenly his dad's there. And you now are going to see Indiana Jones deal with his father. That alone is hook enough. Like the Holy Grail and all that. We know what we're going to get from an Indiana Jones movie. It's not like it's going to be a drawing room comedy. It's not going to be an Ealing Studios movie like Kind Hearts and Coronets. You're still going to get widescreen Spielberg firing on all cylinders. But now we've got, how does Indiana Jones has got a dad? Well, how does that work? Do they have a good relationship? Immediately, questions are instilled in you as an audience member that you're like, I got to see that. If you like Temple of Doom and Raiders, you got to go. This is basic to franchises. You have to figure out, how do you take a character that's beloved and how do you make audiences want to see that character, to put them, familiar characters, in a situation you haven't seen them in before. That's it. That's the simple secret to how do you keep an IP fresh. If you want to tell a man, we saw, how many episodes? 24 episodes of the, 8 seasons longer? I don't remember. But say 30 episodes, whatever it was. We've seen The Mandalorian in a lot of different situations. But, it just, the one they put him in wasn't that interesting. There's got to be, you've got to turn the tables. You've got to be able to tell the audience in your teaser trailer, how is this different? And the movie's even called The Mandalorian and Grogu. That's what you're getting. That's all you're getting. There wasn't like Star Wars, the second movie, even though Star Wars was in the logo, was called The Empire Strikes Back. I know they were going off the old-time serials. Star Wars, it was not called A New Hope at first. So Star Wars, the second movie is called The Empire Strikes Back. It tells you right there. It's like, holy shit. They wrecked shop on that Death Star, so now they're pissed. And immediately the audience is like, yes, please. Yes, please. The Mandalorian and Grogu has, and here's the thing. They couldn't come up with something better, not a better title. It could have been Paradise Lost, starring the Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't know. It could have been. I just think about it. You could take any movie, The Ninth Gate, starring the Mandalorian and Grogu. Anything. Take any movie title. But all they gave you was The Mandalorian and Grogu, because corporate thinking tells you that, look, the Star Wars audience will get it. They understood what The Empire Strikes Back meant. You could have done anything. But corporate thinking, by definition, will always kill a franchise. Because corporate thinking is anathema to storytelling. It is. Because you, by definition, have to give people what they already know. But the thing is, the characters are what you already know. What you want to see is the characters in situations that you don't know, that becomes surprising. There was nothing in The Mandalorian and Grogu that made you go, wow, I didn't expect that. When you watch The Empire Strikes Back, Han and Luke were both put through the ringer. You didn't expect that. Luke fails at the cave. Luke fails Yoda. Han Solo gets captured and tortured by the Imperials. C-3PO gets blown up. Chewbacca's crying. You know, you got to give the audiences something new, something they haven't seen before. Superman 2. The three outlaws from Krypton descend to Earth to confront the Man of Steel in a cosmic battle for world supremacy. That's what it says in the Superman 2 one-sheet. You can get at our poster auction. But you know what? How's that work? Immediately, oh my God, Superman has to fight three Kryptonians. I'm talking about 1981's Superman 2, or 1980 if you live in Australia. But 81. And that's easy to understand. But the problem is, look at what Disney wanted to do with The Force Awakens. Don't blame Kathleen Kennedy. They're like, we need to reestablish Star Wars as a new brand for the kids. You know, what's so weird about that is, why is it this idea that, I mean, Top Gun got it right. You know, you bring Maverick back 36, he's old. Tom Cruise is not so much older or younger than, I don't know how old Mark Hamill is, but he's probably a little older than Tom Cruise. But think about it. No one said, yeah, you know, we can't make Maverick the star of the movie because he's too old. The idea that they didn't start a new Star Wars franchise, episodes of the Skywalker saga, and didn't make Leia, Han, Lando, Chewie, R2, 3PO, all the original characters, that they didn't put them together in a movie and show you the New Republic that they had built, and then have the story about how the New Republic was being taken apart or suffering this new onslaught. Somehow Palpatine returned, is to me one of the great failures of the entertainment industry of the modern age. Huge, huge, huge epic failure by Disney. I mean, Star Wars was not BB-8 or Poe Dameron or Kylo Ren or Rey Skywalker. That was not Star Wars. You have to earn your way into Star Wars. You know, and to not make that movie, to not give us our main characters, was a really idiotic decision. Because what you're forced then to do is you're forced to like somehow work in this universe, and all you can do is come up with analogous characters to the characters we already know. You have to have the pilot. You have to have the strong woman character. You have to have this. I mean, the stormtrooper with a crisis of conscience. That could have been, Finn could have been their great. That would have been an original character that they abandoned that though right away. You know, his torn loyalties could have been something, but nope. Anyway, I don't want to relitigate that, but that's why corporate thinking will never allow a franchise to flourish. You always have to have Ryan Coogler coming back and making Creed. No one hired him to do that. He went to Stallone himself because he wanted to make that movie. That's where you get franchises to succeed. You know, he could have made anything. He came off Fruitvale Station. That guy, Ryan Coogler, decides, okay, I made this indie film. I've got great street cred now. Great movie, Michael B. Jordan. I'm going to go try and make a Rocky sequel. A Rocky sequel? What? That was insane. That's what you're going to spend your cred on? No. He spent his cred on himself and ended up convincing Sly Stallone that he should be allowed to make this movie, this side story about the son of a character that died years ago, died in the 80s. And he won. Why did Ryan Coogler win? Because he was a talented filmmaker. He proved it. But he did Creed because he loved fucking Rocky. Now, that's not always the best way to make a franchise, because the studio's got to trust you, but the movie wasn't that expensive. And he had Michael B. Jordan. You know, he had his best friend or whatever. I don't know. They're probably really good friends, especially now, if they're not best friends already. But they did this thing together. So you had your lead actor who was, you know, he's a beautiful man. Why not? And then they were able to make that movie. Cut to, there's been 3 Creed movies, and now there's going to be a Creed TV series based on the gym. Because of passion. because somebody actually thought about the Rocky franchise. And Sylvester Stallone got an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for the character that he created that we first saw in 1976. I don't understand why people don't look at what Ryan Coogler did for Creed and apply that and say, okay, I want to know what you filmmakers are going to do for the Star Wars franchise. Now, the thing was, people could say, well, Rob, what about what Rian Johnson did? No. You needed to create, and look, I believe that there was a lot more planning that went on in the Star Wars, the sequel franchise, but it was derailed by Carrie Fisher's death, Colin Trevorrow's non-successful film. There was all this second guessing that went along, and you wind up with a movie like The Rise of Skywalker, which is arguably one of the worst franchise films, not just of Star Wars, but one of the worst franchise films ever made. With the exception of Star Trek Into Darkness, which is worse. But both made by the same guy, so not surprising. But anyway, Star Wars, unless you have passionate creators, and by now they've all been run out of town. And it's interesting because they have had passionate creators, whether it was Weiss and Benioff, whether it's James Mangold. I mean, all these passionate creators have come in and wanted to do things, but Disney said no. I'd say, I don't know, with your track record, why don't you just let some passionate creators do what they do? Why get in their way? Give them carte blanche. You can't lose. Rather than play it safe and give us this regurgitated pablum we've seen a million times before. Anyway, I have another article to read too. So, Brendan Lucas says, Kevin Peterson says, how dare you remind me that Star Trek V exists? Well, there's some good parts in it. Brendan Lucas says, they made their reason to see it gambit in The Last Jedi. They wanted you to view power by inheritance with contempt, and the Empire Rebel fight as a stage for capitalism. We rejected it, and now we get swill. Again, you can't have corporate globalists dictating what kinds of mythical stories to tell an audience. It never works. As much as everybody wants to be able to program everyone else, and we want to live in an Orwellian state, and everybody wants to believe certain lies about certain people or certain places or certain things, you can't do that with stories, because stories, you can't escape the idea that a story is either real and you believe it. As I've always said, the best fiction is always the most truthful. And if you're trying to create stories that are just a bunch of lies, we all know. We all know. Why do we know? Because the baseline of Star Wars is Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And look, I understand even the kids that are born today that grew up with the prequel trilogy, they think Star Wars is boring. I hear it all the time from my friends with kids that are now college age and out. They think the original Star Wars is boring. I get it, because, they're adult attention spans, and they've also been undereducated when it comes to things like, reading the classics or even seeing classic movies. No one's seen Kurosawa's. It's amazing to me how many movie fans have not watched The Hidden Fortress or Seven Samurai or Rashomon or Throne of Blood. How do you not watch the movies that Lucas was inspired by to understand a lot more about Star Wars? How do you not watch the Man with No Name trilogy, which is one of the great, as Quentin Tarantino will tell you, the greatest trilogy ever? How do you not watch For a Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? How can you call yourself a film fan? These are seminal texts that will help you understand things like, why does The Mandalorian or why does Boba Fett have a poncho? I'm not saying, and it's not me being an elitist, it's just I like to understand the evolution of storytelling. Where did it all come from? But I understand that's not necessarily for everybody. DUI Champ says, here's a Star Wars pitch. The New Republic declares all Force users illegal and incarcerates Force-sensitive children until they grow out of it. Rey and the Sith have to unite to defend the Force. I mean, that could be interesting, but you have to ask yourself, okay, what is the underpinnings of that story? What is the story that you're trying to tell? So then I would ask, why would the New Republic then suddenly declare all Force users illegal? Especially in the galaxy, there isn't very many Force users left. So why would they? A lot of people don't even believe that the Force exists. So why would they be declared illegal? I know where you're going with that, but I would think from a storytelling standpoint, you'd have to justify that and explain it. Brendan Lucas says that's the stories creatives want to tell. They want to say everything we believe is manufactured consent and that Western tradition is nothing more than a guise for torturing marginalized people. Well, yes, I mean, and that's, look, all of this weird activism that has arisen over the last 25 years, don't get me wrong, it has been programmed into people. It has been programmed into people that don't have great educations. They have been told to believe at the highest levels of academia to reject Western belief. Because all the things, all the oppression, it was the West and it was the development of the modern age that stopped so much oppression around the world. And everybody would have you believe that, America is the most oppressive nation that ever existed. Yeah, we have our problems. But you know what? If you want to, you can do anything here. You really can. Is it easy? No. Do people have certain obstacles they have to face? Sure. But you know what? There's examples of people of all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds succeeding in America. What it takes is what it's always taken. It's taken perseverance, intelligence, creativity, education, a team around you of people that trust your vision. Anybody can do that if they put their mind to it and work hard enough and learn what they need to learn. But most people aren't willing to put in the time. And then it becomes, I'm oppressed. I don't buy into that. Brendan Lucas says, any other story written by these people is just a thinly veiled mocking of it with little more depth than a Saturday morning cartoon show. I don't disagree with that at all. DUI, because look, they've been told because they didn't watch the change and how these changes were happening in the 70s, 80s, 90s to get to the year 2000. Now in 2026, people have been sold a bill of goods, especially younger people, Gen Z, have been sold a bill of goods to believe once again, we're the most oppressive people, oppressed people in the world, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, yeah, because you have no sense of history. You didn't read about 20th century history and how many things were achieved. You've just been told this victim narrative because that's what they need you to think, which is kind of silly to me. And the funny thing is, the more you watch movies, the more you'll learn that wasn't necessarily true. But how do you get people to do that? DUI Champ says, because after 50 years of war, regular people are sick and tired of the Jedi and Sith ruining their lives. That's an interesting story. That's, the very people that you think that are, that's, I love that. George Harrison Ford says, always appreciate you, Rob. I asked Rubio the other night, and now I'll ask you, where do you want Star Wars to go in the next trilogy? Interesting. I think that the notion of where the next trilogy should go is, how do you rebuild or how do you take a civilization back to the glory that it's lost? And how does the individual and groups of people and the state all have to work together? What is the responsibility? And that's what I really missed out on in the modern age. You go from the end of Return of the Jedi. Look, I think one of the great storytelling betrayals of the corporate era is the jump between Return of the Jedi to The Force Awakens. If you're a kid watching Star Wars, whether you're watching it in machete order or whatever, and you get to the end of Return of the Jedi and then you put on Episode 7 as your next movie, that to me is an incredible betrayal of that child. Because if you're watching them back to back, the kid's going to be like, wait a minute, I'm 8 years old. I've watched Return of the Jedi. The first thing I'm going to say is, wait, there's a new group of people called the First Order. Are you telling me that these heroes and these characters I've watched for the previous 6 movies and watched their progression suddenly turned into idiots and allowed the First Order to rise, and the same jackbooted thugs they defeated in the previous movie are just back? What? Our characters would not allow that to happen. So why did they do that? Why? Because they just wanted Disney, a corporate entity, wanted to reset Star Wars. It was a soft reset so they could take it all and start anew. Well, that was the biggest mistake ever. That kind of corporate thinking ended up ruining Star Wars. Ruining it. Star Wars has been ruined. You could say, well, Bob, The Force Awakens made $2 billion. Yeah, but where did it lead? It led to the Mandalorian and Grogu's anemic opening for a Star Wars movie. That's where it led. It wasn't Kathleen Kennedy who did it. It was Disney. It was the idea of a corporation. Well, we can't take R2-D2. R2-D2's an old astromech droid. We have to, I've saw this new technology and we can make something roll around. We'll create BB-8. They literally put R2 as a character. They literally put Baby in the corner. R2-D2 is literally sitting in a corner with a tarp over him because he's apparently been decommissioned. One of the great heroes of the Star Wars franchise, R2-D2, and you're literally going to put a tarp on the dude? Just because why? Because you want to reboot everything and want to pretend he's not around? I mean, think about that. That actually happened in that movie. Who does that? Like, what brain trust? How did J.J. Abrams go, yeah, we got to do that. I understand everybody wants to make money. But at the end of the day, there's a reason that we're going to see a re-release of the original Star Wars next year, 50 years after it came out. You know what no one is ever going to be clamoring for? A re-release of The Rise of Skywalker. Because the modern trilogy went nowhere. They created fraudulent characters that were based on previously existing characters. It was a fraudulent, made-up movie that had a made-up, made up in terms of within the Star Wars franchise. We're just going to have the First Order because we need a villain. Why? You're not going to think about where the galling part about it is the extended universe already told all these stories. They already told what happened after Jedi. Well, they started in 1991 with the Dark Empire comic series and the Thrawn trilogy. They already told us. It was all there. And it was way fucking better. And I don't think the Heir to the Empire books are the greatest books in the world. I mean, but if you adapted Dark Empire, it wouldn't have been so bad. And Palpatine somehow returned. I mean, it's just, it's amazing to me that we have all this rich material. Star Trek does. Hundreds and hundreds of books and comics where you could cherry pick. I could help you. You know what? Over lunch, I'll tell you what the next Star Trek stuff could be. And it would all hit. I can't do the same thing. Angry Badger, I'll bring him with me to the Star Wars meeting. And he can tell you because he knows all the lore. And we could come up with something better. These people just actively pleaded ignorance and didn't do anything. Didn't do their reading. Why would you buy the Star Trek franchise or the Star Wars franchise and not hire a group of people for not more than give them $1,000 a week, $1,000 a week, and they read everything, and they make notes, all the great ideas. Here's what we got. They never did that, and now they got rid of their visual design team over because they can use ChatGPT or whatever they can do, whatever AI program, Claude, whatever. It's so dumb, negligent. Anyway, but what I would do with the next trilogy should be about how do you build a future, because with the remnants of a civilization that has essentially fallen. What do we do? How do we do that? And when you have all these forces, like right now, look at the world today. You know where all great storytelling comes from? It's allegorical for what's happening in our world. Our world is on a precipice. And what are we going to do? Who are we going to be? How are we going to move forward as a people? Go back to watch I, Claudius. Or go back and read some Robert Graves. Don't even watch the TV miniseries. Go back and read the books. I don't understand. It's not that hard. It's like, it's because people they have an aversion to work. They don't want to pick up a book, which they should, because all the great stories, they're all there. Brendan Lucas says, they don't care, Rob. They don't care that the Western tradition liberated millions of souls. All they care about is you are on a podcast with the enemy. You are so right. What Brandon is referring to is, I get people who come after me every day because they object to somebody that I was on a podcast with. Like, how dare you? That person is this, that person is that. I'm like, were they that on the podcast that we were on together? Do you think that if I really thought those people were that way, that I would stream with people I just actively disliked? But everybody wants to, like, curry favor. And you know what? Listen to what people are really saying. That's what I would say. You know, are people making bad jokes, off-color jokes? Are people making crass, offensive jokes? Or are they saying things that are crass and offensive? Yeah. Yeah, people do. I do sometimes. But, you know, listen to what they really say overall. I think a lot of us in this space are disappointed and angry because I have spent my entire life consuming stories. It is if I were to get a PhD, I should get a PhD in storytelling, because I probably could. It is frustrating when I watch people that get paid millions of dollars to work in franchises that I enjoy, to watch them squander that opportunity. And to be clear, it's not because, I'm jealous and I should be in that place. If I wanted to be in that place, I would have fought hard to get there. You know, a friend and I, we contributed a story to Star Trek The Next Generation during its second season. I thought it was pretty good. And it was rejected. I have the letter. I have still the letter back from Paramount. And I know why it was rejected. I didn't know enough to make the story one that would appeal. Now I do. But I never tried it again. I did try. I don't have the background to work in television. No one's going to hire me to work on a Star Trek TV show unless I worked what I've done before. I was a paid Star Trek consultant in the past and did work on Star Trek projects in the past. But I've never done that work. But what I would expect is that the people that the studios hire would know what they're doing. And when I watch J.J. Abrams talk about, I never liked Star Trek. Well, then why are you working on Star Trek? Why'd they hire you? Because you made a mediocre Mission Impossible movie and you squandered the opportunity to make Lost one of the great TV shows of all time. Instead, it becomes one of the great audience betrayals ever. No, they really are in purgatory because we didn't know what we were doing. Your mystery box sucks. It doesn't work because what's in the mystery box is nothing because you didn't know what was in. You can't have a mystery box if you don't know what's in the mystery box yourself. The audience should wonder what's in the box, but if you don't fucking know, fuck you. And that's the kind of storytelling we're getting. I'm going to do a TED Talk about the mystery box. I don't know what's in the mystery box, but I'm going to give a TED Talk about why it's important. The whole point is that the magician knows how to pull the trick off, and the audience doesn't. If you don't know what's in your fucking mystery box, don't sell a goddamn TV show to the network. Fuck you. And make me watch for 6 seasons until you don't have anything in the box. Fuck you. That is what people that are complaining on the internet are pissed off by. They're pissed off because they invest their time, their money. You know, when your brain is colonized by one of these IPs, you think about it. I mean, it might seem silly, but you spend an inordinate amount of time, whether you love a book series, I don't care if it's fucking Twilight, I don't care if it's whatever the thing you love, and you think about it because it's colonized your brain. You think about what the characters are doing. You think about how the plot's going to unfold, what's going to happen in the sequel. It suddenly becomes a part of you. You have been infected by what that thing is. And it never occurs to you that the creators don't know where they're taking you. Most creators used to. Like, we grew up reading fully realized Lord of the Rings. You know, I knew where they were taking me. Now, it was apparent when I bought God Emperor of Dune. I had no fucking clue, and I don't know if if Frank Herbert knew where he was going to take me either, but where he took me in God Emperor of Dune was fucking crazy. And I'm like, that shit was nuts. You know, and then, of course, Chapter Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune, that shit spun off into oblivion. But you know what? It was the original creator going nuts, and I was there for it. We expect that these people that are paid millions of dollars to work on these projects know what they're doing. Not that they decide to retcon or change things simply because of the political atmosphere they're working in. That, to me, is fraudulent creation. I don't appreciate that. And a lot of people don't appreciate it, and people are asking. And to me, it's not about the stories. It is a metaphor for what's happening with life today. Because everyone doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. And people are not educated. And they're doing things willy-nilly based on their fucking feelings. That doesn't help you write a great story. And the thing is, great stories shape civilization. They always have. Why do you think that the Greeks and the Romans had their gods? Their gods shaped their civilization. And there were great stories surrounding them. That's what our myths, even though they're fictional, because now we're smart enough to know that Star Wars and Star Trek aren't real. But that's the problem that we have, is we have a bunch of entitled assholes who don't do the work, who are now creating our great franchises, and they show up and they can only deliver things that are mediocre because they've thought about these things far less than the audience has. The audience is way smarter than the people that are creating these things. Not everything. There are some creators that really deliver. There are some creators that really know what they're doing. And you know what? Those shows are usually hits. Taylor Sheridan knows his audience. Shit, man, I tune into a clip from Yellowstone. I've never watched much of Yellowstone. I watched Landman, though. I tune into a clip from Landman. The clips that are on YouTube that are 90 seconds long from Taylor Sheridan shows are better than half the fucking IP giant blockbusters we're watching in a theater. One clip of Yellowstone could make a better Star Wars movie than the fucking Mandalorian and Grogu was. Just extrapolate out. I don't even know what's going on. I just see two characters going out at each other. One speech from Billy Bob Thornton on the fucking Landman show. I'm like, we could turn that into a Star Wars movie that would be way better than the Mandalorian and Grogu, because that 90 seconds of dialogue was better than the 2 hours and 18 fucking minutes of a Star Wars movie. That's a problem. That's a problem. And Star Wars has had this problem. Now, I'm even gonna say that even outside of the prequel trilogy, but I'm saying they had an opportunity to give us greatness. What's the best Star Wars movie that's come out in the last 10 years? Top Gun fucking Maverick. Make no mistake, that's just Return of the Jedi, but good. What happens at the end of that movie? Well, they attack the Death Star too. I mean, shit, man. You know what? Imagine if Han and Luke were stuck on the Death Star and had to get out and they had to fly an old X-Wing or something. Top Gun Maverick. You look at Top Gun Maverick, best Star Wars movie since 2015. I mean, it's not hard to do. Who was passionate about making Top Gun Maverick great? How long did it take to develop that script? A long time. Because you have Tom Cruise. His mission in life was to make a sequel that was good. Nobody was going to let that shit fail. You think Tom Cruise was going to allow? What you need is the Tom Cruise of Star Wars. That's what you need. You need somebody that commands the power to come in and go, nope, we're going to do it just like this. Now, you could say, and I don't think Tom Cruise is infallible, I would say to Tom, you really fucked up with the last two Mission Impossible movies. You take Rogue Nation and Fallout. Those movies were fucking great. And you guys were more impressed with your action scenes, and you didn't write the scripts you should have. And you know you were bad boys. You know. Cost the studio a lot of money. But you know what? You guys know. I don't have to tell you. Anyway, John, is that John Jim or just John JM? Rob, I think Disney's aversion to showing in-universe politics in the sequel trilogy hurt it. I wanted to see the machinations of the I wanted to see the machinations of the New Republic. That could have been interesting. I totally agree. Because why not? We want to know what the New Republic is. let's see, Eric debunks. As Gen X, we have done so much harm to this community by being miserable. Who would want to be a part of this when all we do is complain? Can't blame them. It's not just Gen X. Look, you know what Gen X is? You know what Gen X wants? Good fucking stories. That's what we want. We're miserable because we keep getting served up swill. And you know what? All we want is for people to do the work. You know what? I'll tell you something. Here's another example. Do I love Back to the Future 2 and 3? Do I love them? Back to the Future 1, the original, is a near perfect movie. But you know what? Back to the Future 2 is kind of bonkers. Back to the Future 3 is a Western. I'll tell you something. I watch Back to the Future 2 and 3. And of course, they're never going to reach the heights of the Back to the Future, the original, is simplistic and perfect. It's a perfect movie. It really is. But Back to the Futures 2 and 3, Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis came back and said, we're not going to do a rehash. Those movies are worth watching. Now, I don't love the Western milieu for Back to the Future 3, but you go back and you watch it now. When I watched those movies when they came out, I didn't know what the fuck was happening. And you could say that the time travel mechanics in Back to the Future 2 kind of violated Back to the Future 1 and the idea. It doesn't matter. I don't care. You watch those movies, you know what they have? Creative integrity. Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis, the Bobs came back and they delivered something unexpected because they were in control. And, you know, we're tired. I would say that the disappointment really began in 1999 because we had Phantom Menace. Same year, actually, I want to say The Matrix came out in April and Phantom Menace came out in May of 99. Can you imagine? I can imagine because I was there. What it was like to see The Matrix and then go see The Phantom Menace. What the fuck, guys? Really, George? Really? But then The Matrix led us down the same path of disappointment. Why? Because they wanted to cash in on all that money. And the Wachowskis, I don't blame them. I might not love The Matrix, Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, but I'll tell you this. There's a lot of shit in there to see. You know, I mean, there's some bonkers shit. Don't love it, but it's periodically some epic shit. They just didn't have enough time to refine it. But anyway, nowadays, I don't know. I don't blame Gen X. We grew up with this golden age of the establishment of these IPs. Golden age of it. And there's been, by the way, look, I love the TV series For All Mankind. A lot of people don't love it. And some people really don't like the fact that we're kind of stuck on Mars, but that's the natural evolution of where we were going. And I love this end of season 5. Wait till you see it tomorrow night. But anyway, there is stuff that we're getting that is good and has integrity. And we're finding it in other places other than our venerable, long-standing IPs. Because those venerable, long-standing IPs, they're not doing the due diligence. They're not doing what they should be doing. And I'll tell you, here's one of the problems, too. You want to know what one of the biggest problems is? In Hollywood, if you buy a Star Wars, there's only about 5 people in Hollywood that are deemed worthy to direct that film. That's true. No one's opening it up to filmmakers because there's too much money involved. So the amount of money it takes to make a Star Wars movie precludes any. You're not going to see a Ryan Coogler step in from Fruitvale Station and take over Star Wars. I mean, the days of Colin Trevorrow making the $1 million Safety Not Guaranteed and directing Jurassic World is never going to happen again, because Star Wars needs a visionary. And why they didn't go out and go to all these great filmmakers, but now nobody wants to do the Star Wars. You can't make a Star Wars movie now because a new filmmaker that will end your fucking career. Look at Lord and Miller. How long has it been they directed Solo? How long has it been from Solo to Project Hail Mary? You can't direct a Star Wars movie. Nobody can. It will ruin your career. Unless you're allowed to do something, they've got to pull Steve Asbell, the president of 20th Century Studios. They've got to follow Asbell's lead. As a matter of fact, I would put Asbell in charge of Star Wars, Because you might not love Alien Romulus, you might not love Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, you might not love Hellraiser, you might not love Prey, you might not love Badlands, but you know what? Those movies were all made for a price, and for the most part, they were successful. And they're also, people forget, Predator Badlands was hugely successful after its theatrical run. People forget to take that into consideration. You've got to make movies cheaper, and that way you can risk more creatively. That's the only way to save these IPs. And then when you make them, get people that know how to make films so you don't have to spend fucking $300 million. But anyway, Rob, does Disney just not want to pay old residuals? No, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. Residuals are residuals. The aliens, the agencies, or the guilds lock you into those things. There's rules. Dr. Fauci's pardoned prison bud says, we began to lose the aspiration in Western culture after World War I. In 1900, everything seemed possible after we began to see ourselves as merchants of death. Well, that's an interesting idea, an interesting historical idea. Maybe. Look, I just think that, you know what? If you tell everybody that Western civilization is so fucking terrible, they are not going to see the possibilities that Western civilization has presented to them. And they don't see what they can do. Western civilization has liberated most people. Is it still problematic? Yes. Yes, it is. It hasn't been perfect, but nothing is. But we were on a pretty great rate in this country, and it kind of got derailed beginning in the 2000s, and it really got derailed with the smartphone, because what did that do? It gave people bad actors, and I'm not putting on my tinfoil conspiracy hat here. Social media has been used, and it has been weaponized against the West in a huge way, unfortunately. Brendan Lucas says, my favorite bit is when the smoke monster wears Locke's face and it fights Jack. So it's like a long time coming, but it's also not. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Hey, lost out when the idea between faith and science, which was at the core of that, was abandoned. What a waste. Jamie Sunday says Star Wars needs to grow up. Andor just proves Star Wars needs mature in its storytelling. I'm done with the stupid fun trope it's trying to do because it sucks at it. You're so right. We can't do fun right. Grow up. The thing was, Star Wars and Empire were fun. Do you think people came out of The Empire Strikes Back and said, oh my God, I'm so depressed, that ending, oh my God. It was fucking fun. Seeing Han Solo tortured, I'm sorry, it was harrowing, but it was also fun. It was fun. They didn't even ask me any questions. All of Empire Strikes Back, for as dark as it got, fun. You think people didn't love Hoth, the rebels getting routed, and Vader coming into the rebel base? You think people didn't like that? That was fucking fun. Vader wrecks shop in that movie. Everything about that movie was fun, and it was dark, because fun doesn't have to equate to stupid. They don't have to make things dumb. I mean, the problem with Mandalorian is there was no stakes. When you make a movie about a bunch of robots and monsters, who fucking cares? Because we're human beings. I'm not watching an animated movie. That's what that was. It was an animated film with a few live action characters. It wasn't a movie that was at all. That movie was designed for children, and everyone thinks that's what Star Wars is designed for. Everybody. It should be timeless, but it's not. JCGR, is that Jesus Christ Gear or something? Speaking of Robert Graves, that's what's up. That's what I'm talking about. He wrote a book called The White Goddess. Guess who's been puzzling over that book for decades? John Williams. Well, that makes sense. That tracks. Robert Graves is a hell of an author, although to be fair, I've only read Claudius. Brendan Lucas says, I just want a Les Grossman movie. I would kill for a Les Grossman movie, but they've got to have the right writers. A Les Grossman movie could be great. The Legend of Les Grossman. I would love to see it. Love to see it. Brendan Lucas goes on to say, how different was your physical and emotional reaction to the end of the Doomsday script to your physical and emotional reaction to Infinity War? What do you mean? What are you talking about, Doomsday script? I don't know what you mean. The end of the Doomsday script. Huh. Here's what I will say about Avengers Doomsday. I love the MCU. I think Infinity War and Endgame are two of the finest fantasy films, and I think of them as one long movie because they were conceived that way. What's really interesting is if you go back and you look at what the Russo brothers did on Winter Soldier, Civil War, and Infinity War and Endgame. They had an enormous amount, and Marcus and McFeely, who wrote the scripts, did an amazing job with plot and character. And the real strength of those movies, the reason those movies work is all the shenanigans and the action, that's fine. We love those characters. We love those characters. And the character, they never sacrifice character interplay in any of the Russo brothers movies. And their Avengers movies, those two Avengers films, I mean, look, they're comic book movies about superheroes. I get that. I'm not expecting Sophie's Choice. I'm not expecting Woody Allen's Interiors. But as far as fantasy films about, and people might quibble about how fantastical Endgame gets and the time heist and the Infinity Stones and all that. What do you expect? I mean, at the end of the day, it was a gigantic narrative. And if you watch that 5-hour narrative, it works really, really well. So you have to assume, and you can say, well, Rob, it was all built up to Thanos. There wasn't a whole lot of Thanos in the entire Infinity Saga. You knew he was coming, but basically you got those two movies. I mean, he wasn't a big player in the other films. But when it comes to Doomsday, this is going to seem weird. My entire objection, here's my greatest problem with, I don't care that Robert Downey Jr. is playing Dr. Doom. I don't care that there hasn't been any build up to that, because that works. I've been a comic book fan my whole life. It's like a giant summer annual event. But what I would say is the thing that they never did, and I think this was a mistake, is in phases 4, 5, and 6 of the MCU, what they never did was ground the MCU again. And what I mean by that is we never dealt with the Earth. We saw glimpses of it in like Falcon and Winter Soldier when Sam Wilson tried to get a loan for the boat. We never understood after, they talk about it might, after disclosure, and if humanity knew what I knew about UAPs, the ontological shock, most people couldn't handle it. Well, there was a gigantic ontological shock that happened to the planet Earth in the wake of Endgame. The entire world, humanity coming back from Thanos being snapped, all of our religious beliefs, all of the things that humanity thought about their existence, everything about our place in the world would have been swept away. But nope, we're just back in high school with Spider-Man. They didn't deal with any of that. And whether consciously or subconsciously, we, the audience, knew. Everything that happened in Infinity War and Endgame was not taken into consideration as the MCU moved forward. They needed to incorporate how the world changed and how the MCU, literally the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they wanted to go back as if nothing had happened and just keep telling stories. I believe that this was a problem. I believe that the entire MCU is affected by this. And people would say, well, Rob, who cares? Well, the problem is, after such a shock and after such, humanity would be irrevocably changed, and that we would never be the same again. And all of our belief systems would be focused on the fact, can you imagine? Just imagine if you suddenly became non-corporeal, you disappeared, and they did a great job showing this by the way, MCU did. You disappear, and then you reconstitute, and 5 years. Imagine if you blinked your eye, and 5 years had gone by. I mean, what would that do to people? That was half the population of the planet, and they didn't deal with this. But half the people, their money would be gone. You know, how would you? The Earth would be in such a shambles, and they never bothered to ever delve into that. What they should have done, and what I would have done, is there's a great comic series that brought Alex Ross to the attention of the world. It's called Marvels. And it was basically from a street perspective, how does humanity view superheroes? They should have done that kind of a series. And you would have had Marvel characters peripherally. You know, we would have met all the Avengers and everything, but we would have seen the movie would have been about modern. I don't know how you do it, whether it's a reporter or Ben Reilly, whoever it was. You know, I don't know who it would have been, but they could have done a movie about the existential shock of what the world was like post Thanos. And would that have been? It would not have been your traditional superhero movie. It also wouldn't have cost $100 million or $200 million. But if they dealt with that, and you could have met all the superheroes and found out what's going on. I mean, Doctor Strange was one of these people. What did Dormammu think about what happened when Thanos was he affected? You know, were the Celestials, did one of each of the did half of them go away? I mean, I don't know. But I do think that Marvel missed an opportunity by, and I'm leading into my biggest problem with Avengers Doomsday. Here's what I think the biggest problem with Avengers Doomsday is going to be. I don't think anybody who knows their Marvel comics, we know that we're going from Doomsday to Secret Wars. The Hickman Secret Wars. Maybe they'll throw in the symbiote from the original Secret Wars and Peter Parker will get it. I don't know. But if you think about that, we have a very short period of time from the end of Thanos snapping the world back, or Iron Man snapping the world back, to the end of not just the end of Earth, the end of time itself. I mean, that's what Doomsday is going to be about. The end of multiple worlds. The end of the entire multiverse, if you've read the comics. And then, I mean, I don't know anything about Secret Wars, but presumably, where Doomsday ends is in a specific place. If you've read the comics, you'll know. You'll know. It ends in that place, unless they change it in reshoots. You can imagine. So we're there. The universe ends. We still haven't dealt with humanity. What does the man on the street think? You know, we've gone from Thanos snapping back the world to. But anyway, I'm totally off track. But I do think that that's a problem in the narrative, because once again, the world itself is not. And you can say, Rob, what does that matter in terms of superhero stories? The best thing that the Marvel Cinematic Universe did was make us believe that those characters exist in the real world. And I think in phases 4, 5, and 6, they abandoned the real world. I mean, think about it. Tony Stark in Iron Man 1 exists in Stark Enterprises. That's the real world. And so often we saw the heroes interacting with the real world. I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. was part of the real world. You know, Hydra had infiltrated it, but you're still dealing with the real world. And that worked. I mean, when they're in Lagos at the beginning of Civil War, they're in a real place dealing with real terrorists. The real world was always a big part of the MCU. They fucking abandoned that shit. And that was a problem. And what did that do? It untethered the MCU from the real world. There was not enough real world in phases 4, 5, and 6. And that's why people didn't like it as much. Because it was just, Quantumania, what the fuck was that? What the fuck was Love and Thunder? Who cares? I mean, they did a pretty good job with Ragnarok. I thought Ragnarok was a good balance, and it's fine. Because it was called Ragnarok. You knew what you were in for. But Thor, Love and Thunder, and Quantumania didn't work at all. Where was I? So, yes, I was talking about Brendan Lucas. My physical reaction to the end of the Doomsday script. I don't know what you're talking about in regards to the Doomsday script. I don't know what you mean. Don't know, but that's I never read screenplays for Infinity War and Endgame. I as a matter of fact, I went into Endgame totally spoiler free, and I was richly rewarded. Techniques One says, "What are the worst flaws in Back to the Future? Are there any? I mean, are there any? I mean, you could nitpick, but I don't think there really are any flaws in Back to the Future. I think they set up their story, and they work it pretty well. You can have quibbles and nitpicks, and I could get into them, but that's a separate show. It's not a bad idea, though. Billy D. Shillum says, I don't want to see any Star Wars set within 1,000 years of A New Hope, and it's hard for me to watch any Star Wars knowing that the murderer is making more. Well, I know. But that's, corporations. It's a bummer. McPlainview says, if you woke up tomorrow 20 years ago, again in 2020, if you woke up tomorrow 20 years old and in 2026, what would you do? Do you think your storytelling expertise would be your competitive advantage? No, because it would still be this 2026. I'll tell you what I would do. I would certainly embrace AI and Palmer Luckey and people like Anduril. I'd go fucking work for them. Figure out what I needed to do. Because look, our world has changed, irrevocably changed. And the things that matter to me and storytelling, you can't, look, the fact is men are not reading novels anymore. Some do. But for the most part, the publishing industry is catering to women. That's why science fiction sucks. That's why romantasy has become the height of and this is not a slam on women. Women and men like different things. Women are more attracted to things that are involving people. Men like machines, and we like stuff like that. We're different. There's nothing wrong with that, but women's interests have taken over publishing in terms of fantasy and science fiction. And then you also have the activist element, I hate to say leftist, but you have the minority groups that now have their voice, and they're the ones writing predominantly a lot of this stuff, but they're only catering to their built-in audience, which is relatively small. So it's a problem. All of that is a problem. Jamie Sunday says it needs to adapt the Middle East conflict, lean into 1996 to 2008 storyline between the USA, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Star Wars needs to be political. Yeah, but the problem is Star Wars has to be political, but in a very slight way, in a way that isn't overt. Even though it is called Star Wars, and I loved Andor, but to make it too much about realpolitik, I think is problematic, because then it becomes preachy, and then you're alienating people on one side or the other. How about, make it anti-war or something. But I don't know if you need. I think Star Wars is political. It's always been political, but it hasn't been necessarily overtly political. It is the struggle about a republic and an empire. It's just, which I've always loved. That's why, in Gladiator, Republic, Joaquin says, Commodus says, I love that stuff. But you know what? If you were to ask most people today, what's the difference between a republic and an empire? Could they tell you? People don't even know what apartheid means. They don't even know the proper definition of it. Ask people to talk about a republic and an empire, they won't know. Which is frustrating, because people's education about even American civics, people don't even understand our own government or how our own systems of governance work. And here's the thing, because they don't know that when you add politics into their fantasy, like, hey, it's boring, I don't like this. Why is it so political? Well, why can't something be political without you thinking it's directly relating to you? The reason why people don't like things that are political now is because they don't really understand them. They don't really understand what politics is. They know who they like, and they like whoever they like for small reasons they like them for, but they're unable to look at the big picture. We, as Americans, our 250th anniversary is coming up. We should be able to have conversations about politics and remove ourselves from the conversation, where you're not arguing like exactly what you want or what you believe, but if you want to have a political argument about, let's talk about Republican or Democratic policy from 1950 to today, and ask yourself, are we happy with where the two political parties in the United States have come? I would think that anybody should be able to discuss and at least address the issues without having knockdown fights with people. But we've apparently forgot the ability to have these conversations. And it used to be, we learned all this stuff in school. Americans don't know civics anymore. We don't even know how our political system works. So how can you expect people that are so ignorant about their own political system to be able to look at a story about politics and understand what the story is trying to say? And I think that's another problem. Like you can't even discuss, on these YouTube channels, nobody wants to discuss politics, which I understand, but how do you not discuss politics when politics are a part of almost any story? Because I mean, if you're telling, I love courtroom dramas. I'll watch a courtroom drama. You give me a courtroom drama, I'll watch it. They've been catnip to me. I used to love watching E.G. Marshall and The Defenders. When I was a kid, it was way above my pay grade, but I loved watching it. I love courtroom dramas. But there's a lot of people that are bored by those things. And they're bored because they don't know. They don't know about how much fun those can be. However, I do think, watching Suits, you don't need to know anything about courtroom dramas when you watch Suits because it's a good show anyway, but it's a bummer. Angela Galvin says, "Hi, Rob. I was wondering what your favorite Tom Ripley adaptation is. My favorite is The American Friend, Wim Wenders. I love The American Friend. Love it, love it, love it. As a matter of fact, I own it, and I watch it probably more times than I'd care to admit. I do love The American Friend, which is great. I love the new Ripley, the series Ripley. I thought was pretty good. And John Malkovich. My favorite. You know what? I also like Purple Noon. Purple Noon's pretty good. I think Purple Noon was like the first Ripley adaptation I ever saw. But Purple Noon, I mean, it's different. Alain Delon. But I really do love The Talented Mr. Ripley. I love Jude Law in it. I want to live in the first half an hour of that movie. But I also think, I didn't like it when I saw it first, but then I just love that film. The end of that, the whole last half of that movie is great. So, I don't know. But that's my answer for you there. DUI Champ says Star Wars has to be philosophical and not political. I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I could definitely see that as being the case. I'm just going to check and see if anyone threw in any tips that I've missed. I don't see any. Oh, wait, I do. Hang on, here's one from Tack. Here's a tip from Tack. I see you sipping that mudslide. This is a White Russian. I guess mudslide. I was going to have one tonight, but it's 540 calories, so I got to save it for tomorrow. Enjoy another can on me. Well, thanks for that. Are they really that much? Is there really that many calories in here? Shit, man. I shouldn't be drinking. I'm looking for. Now you've got me. Boy, I have to look in that. Are they really that much? Shit, man, that's worse than beer. I got to start working out and stop drinking. These are so good though. MTH88020 says, "Hey Rob, did you watch Law and Order when it first aired in 1990?" I did. I liked Law and Order. I liked the how half of it was the cop story and half was the lawyer story. I thought that was really neat. I like that. I can't believe it's, variations on it are still on TV. That's just amazing to me. And Tack sent in something else. Tack said, every time I watch Star Wars 1977, I am in awe. A roller coaster of epic with amazing world building and storytelling with a fuck yeah ending that makes you clap. It's weird, confident, and ambitious. And I can see why it started an entire universe. Tack, you are so right. And I tried to articulate what it was like to see it back in the day. Now look, I haven't even got to the final article that I wanted to read and my letters, and I've got them. So if you want to hang out some more, let's do that. Let's do that. Hang on, let me find. I hope I didn't close this. I might have closed. Oh no, did I? Did I close my article? Hang on, I hope I didn't. No, I didn't. It's here. Let me just clean up my I've got all this stuff that's been sliding around. So let me find it here one more time. Here it is. I found it. So this article comes to us. This one does come from Forbes, not Fortune. I read about it in Forbes magazine. This article was published on August 28th, 2023, and it's by Eric Kane. And let's delve into it, shall we? Here we go. Relentless mediocrity is killing Star Wars. Oops, see, I just fucked that up. There we go. Star Wars has lost its way. I think it lost its way before Disney acquired Lucasfilm, though the sins of the House of Mouse tend to differ fundamentally from the shortcomings of George Lucas himself. The former has inundated us with unsatisfying content. The latter let his once brilliant IP wither on the vine. Which brings me to a different headline I was toying around with. Andor has ruined Star Wars for me. Andor is simply so much better than anything else from the Disney era, and better than anything, I'd argue, since the original trilogy in its original format, that the rest just pales in comparison. The Mandalorian Season 3 felt cheap, directionless, and slapdash. The less said about Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Book of Boba Fett, the better. Ahsoka, so far at least, leaves much to be desired. All this money and so little to show for it. Mediocrity is the word I'm looking for. Star Wars has become relentlessly mediocre. It's not that there isn't anything to like about these shows. It's that they all feel half-baked and overblown, like butter spread over too little bread, to borrow a phrase from Mr. Baggins. Did Obi-Wan Kenobi need to be a TV series? It had about enough content for a 2-hour movie. The rest was awkward enough and rather boring filler. The new Willow series was dreadful for many reasons, not the least of which was Disney's inability to hire talented writers who actually understood what made the original film so beloved, and I can't help but wonder if it might have been better as a 90-minute film. Alas, Willow will now once again languish in obscurity for decades, I suspect. Does Ahsoka need to be an 8-episode series, or would it have been better served as a more tightly drawn film? I can't answer that yet, but looking back on most of the Star Wars and Marvel Disney Plus shows, I can honestly say that the vast majority, with few exceptions, would have made better movies than shows. In the Marvel space, WandaVision is the only Disney Plus show that works perfectly as a TV series. There aren't many reasons for this, but the clever format that drops Wanda and Vision and the other townsfolk into different sitcom eras works perfectly as a TV show. The episodes were generally shorter as well, and each had a different intro song that adapted the old style of the sitcom era it was lampooning. Structurally, WandaVision was perfect for TV. Other Marvel shows, from Falcon and the Winter Soldier to She-Hulk, would have worked better as movies. They didn't need so much time to tell so little story. Andor, like WandaVision, shows us that the television format can work for Star Wars, but only if constructed properly. Gilroy blocked out several different story arcs within the first season of the show, handing each to a team of writers and directors while overseeing the overarching series. Each arc had a beginning, a middle, and an end that propelled viewers through, albeit often slowly, as the show certainly is a slow burn, to a series of climactic moments that led directly to the next block of episodes. Indeed, at the time, I lamented the weekly release, believing still that releasing each chunk of episodes each week would have been the savvier move. There is no way to take all 4-ish arcs in Andor and turn them into a satisfying film. But fans have already stripped down Obi-Wan Kenobi into an unofficial film, and I bet it would be easy to do the same for The Falcon or Hawkeye or Book of Boba Fett. Of course, it's not just that Andor works well on a TV series that sets it apart. It's also better than any of the Disney-era Star Wars films and leaps and bounds better than Lucas's prequel films. This is largely because the writing is excellent. The attention to detail in every set and costume is unparalleled in Star Wars, and the terrific actors are all given great material to work with. In other words, at every turn, Andor strives for excellence, whereas just about every other modern Star Wars offering trucks in cheap tricks, cameos, Easter eggs, and half-cooked ideas. Fan service in all the wrong ways. The sequel trilogy was not only rushed, it was incoherent, with nobody overseeing an overarching storyline for all 3 films. This oversight, this dreadful calamity, remains utterly baffling to me. With just such little effort and care, not to mention competent management, the trilogy could have been mapped out all at once with a compelling arc from episodes 7 to 9. Instead, we get whiplash between each film. Relentless, unabating mediocrity prevails time and time again. Gilroy was also the man Disney brought in to save Rogue One, though he came to the project well into production. Save it he did, as Rogue One, warts and all, remains the best of the new Star Wars movies. I've never been interested in Star Wars ever, so I had no reverence for it whatsoever. I was unafraid about that, Gilroy told The Hollywood Reporter of his work on the film, and they were in such a swamp. They were in so much terrible, terrible trouble that all you could do was improve their position. Watching Rogue One post-Andor, it's hard not to notice all the little things it gets wrong. Andor gave us something new while also managing to feel more Star Wars than anything since the original trilogy. They never say, "May the Force be with you," or fight with lightsabers, but it still feels so intrinsically Star Wars, the aesthetic is just so. But Rogue One wasn't the only thing in so much terrible, terrible trouble. The problems facing the entertainment industry after the broken promises of Netflix's streaming future remain an existential crisis for Hollywood writ large. One could argue that the reason so much Star Wars content is felt like it's in one stage of identity crisis or another is because Disney's decision to start making all the new content for its streaming service, Disney Plus, rather than releasing theatrically or on traditional cable television. While the problems with the Star Wars film can't be laid at the feet of the streaming wars or pandemic-induced delays, the wider issues facing Hollywood, which have led directly to the current writers and actors strikes, are major culprits in this fiasco nonetheless. Writing at the Ankler, showrunner Alina Smith, Dickinson from Apple TV, lays out the great Netflix scam in no uncertain terms. The story of the streaming wars has been widely told by now, but I'll provide a short recap. In the pilot episode of this limited series, so to speak, TV and film's great disruption was kicked off by Netflix, who came raging into the business with a fire hose of speculative cash, unleashing the biggest spending spree in the history of the industry. Netflix did so while deploying the classic Silicon Valley strategies of predatory pricing, vertical integration, and hoarding of data in order to grab market share and make it impossible for the so-called legacy media companies, translation, those dinosaurs who still need to make a profit off of entertainment, to compete. Netflix, like Uber and yes, like WeWork, was selling a story, a story of unlimited growth and infinite scale, of monopolistic market domination. As long as interest rates remained at zero and subscription numbers kept going up, Wall Street bought the story. And so did the old guard of legacy media, who, tossing aside a century's worth of experience and relationships in the notoriously unpredictable entertainment business, one by one threw their hats in the streaming ring, seduced by the promise of unwavering growth, each starting their own, often amusingly named, direct-to-consumer subscription content platforms. She notes that artists, writers, and actors, and all the rest, were seduced into this new streaming utopia where early payouts cloaked dangerous realities. And once Netflix made this model the new normal, other companies followed suit. Now there were no more Nielsen ratings, no more box office numbers, no more publicly available feedback loop of any kind to reveal to anyone, artists, executives, audience, critics, which of the ever-mounting heap of shows or movies were actually being watched and enjoyed. To make matters still more murky, Amazon and Apple joined the money-burning carnival, setting up in-house branding operations disguised as entertainment studios that were really just diversified value adds to the products and bundles that form the core of their massive tech ecosystems. Smith says she has no idea how successful her own show was on Apple, and isn't certain Apple can even tell. The mighty algorithm continues to churn out the relentless mediocrity we're all slowly coming to accept as the new normal, with only those rare diamonds in the rough to remind us what it ought to be. In their mad rush off the digital cliff, these companies transformed Hollywood from a high-wage, high-profit, hits-driven industry into a low-wage, low-profit, subscription-driven one, Smith writes. They also broke the basic bargain at the heart of show business, which is that creative artists and independent producers will share in the financial success their work creates. Smith quotes Warner Brothers boss David Zaslav speaking in an earnings call that sounds more like a confessional. Let's face it, the strategy to collapse all windows, starve linear TV and theatrical, and spend money with abandon while making a fraction in return, all in the service of growing subscription numbers, has ultimately proven to be deeply flawed. You can say that again. They're old adages, but good ones. Less is more. Quality over quantity. You pay for what you get, you reap what you sow. If you want to save Star Wars, you have to make less Star Wars, and you need to release more of it in theaters. You can't just throw money at this IP and flood Disney Plus with content. You need to hire the most talented writers and directors and producers and costume designers and special effects people and give them time and money to make something great. And you need to make that profitable. Invest in the creative people making your content, and you'll get better content. The same applies to Marvel. Less is more. We are inundated with content that isn't very compelling, that increasingly feels not just designed by committee, but designed for algorithm. Consumers have trouble keeping up with all this lackluster crap. What we want is quality. The White Lotus, Barry, Severance. That's what will bring us back in the long run, and not just superfans who will watch everything and buy all the toys. But it's unclear if Hollywood even has the right tools to gauge success anymore. Star Wars has fallen on hard times. Maybe it's always been on hard times, at least since the end of the first trilogy, and certainly beginning with George Lucas's unforgivable edits to the original films. But it doesn't have to be this way, and Andor proves it. If Disney wants to save Star Wars, they need to dial it back, do some soul-searching, and maybe shake up management a bit, and then proceed with caution. As for the bigger problems facing all of Hollywood, that's trickier. In her article, Smith calls for political action against monopolistic forces threatening to usher in a dystopian future, and I can't argue with her conclusions. We're already well on the way to that dystopia, Smith argues, but we can still change course. We must restore open markets for TV and film and stop these monopolies from ruining a time-honored industry that has for generations created so much of what makes it good to be alive. Without major changes to the current trajectory, our entertainment industry is poised to collapse, and one of America's most popular cultural exports, and one of the most crucial and defining aspects of our society, will crumble and fade. A great deal of damage has been done to the Star Wars brand and to the entertainment industry writ large, but I still have hope it can be saved. Rebellions are built on hope, after all. Now, again, that article is a little bit outdated, even though it's from 2023, but I agree with it, the sentiment of it. And I think that Miss Smith was right, and the author was great to cite her. So, yeah. So then we have Brendan Lucas saying, you missed my super chat, but probably for good reason. Which super chat did I miss? Oh, Brendan Lucas says, your incredulous reaction to a certain unreleased copyright property tells me that reaction will only get worse if someone was to adapt it for the screen. A certain unreleased copyright property. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. If you want to talk about Avengers Doomsday, I am deliriously excited to see Avengers Doomsday. Deliriously excited. And look, everybody's trepidations going into Avengers Doomsday, I totally understand. I do not have those trepidations. I think it's going to be bonkers fun. My only worry is that they might take things that were going to be in the beginning of the movie and move them into Endgame, which I can understand. I hope they don't do that. But I not that I would know what was in the beginning of Doomsday. But and obviously they've changed it. You know, the movies are very iterative, so you never know where they're at. But I'm not some fucking paid shill. I mean, if you look around me, I have stacks of Marvel omnibuses all around me. Look, there's this whole level all the way around me is all Marvel omnibuses. There must be 100 Marvel omnibuses here. Not as many as Gem Mint, but I have a lot of Marvel omnibuses, and I still get more. I just saw that I'm missing the X-Men Blue and the Gold omnibus that came out. I love X-Men omnibuses. I love Marvel omnibuses. I can't wait to see Avengers Doomsday. I don't care. All the lead up to the look, they got to introduce Doctor Doom somehow. So he's going to be in a movie, and he's going to be Doomsday and Secret Wars. Bring it on. I don't care. It's all awesome to me. I will say this. Do I think Doomsday is going to be great? I do. I do think Doomsday is going to be great. I think I don't care what the Russo. I don't care about Electric State. I don't care about Cherry. I don't care about, the Gray Man. I don't. There's valid concerns there. I think Doomsday is going to kick ass. I think it's bonkers as fuck. Potentially there's things in it that I just want to see how they're going to do it. Like, how are they going to do that? I mean, go back and read the lead up to Hickman's Secret Wars and read Secret Wars. I have those 3 omnibuses right over there. And just read what they're going to do. It's insane. I mean, in terms of fantasy filmmaking, it's just the whole story is insane. There are changes. Are there going to be the Beyonders? No, I don't think they're Molecule Man. No, I wouldn't imagine. But I think it's going to be great. Homo erectus says George Lucas said Star Wars is for 12-year-olds. I think that's a retcon. I don't think the first Star Wars was for 12-year-olds, and I don't think the Empire Strikes Back was for 12-year-olds. Return of the Jedi was for 7-year-olds. So he's wrong on all counts. McPlainview says, if you could direct an adaptation of any horror novel, what would be your top picks? Oh, I've got answers for that. If I could Flanagan my life and direct a miniseries, a horror miniseries, and somebody would allow me to do whatever I wanted, Robert McCammon's They Thirst. I would want to do Robert McCammon's They Thirst, I think from 1981. I would love to go back and I would love to direct Skip Inspector's novel The Scream and set it in like the 80s, early 90s. I'd love to do that. I would love to do Poppy Bright's Lost Souls, vampires. There's a book, Dan Simmons. I'd love to do Carrying Comfort. I'd love to direct Carrying Comfort or make Carrying Comfort into a movie. There's so many horror novels that I would love to turn into a film. I know that I would produce Dave Parker's adaptation of Richard Lamont's The Woods Are Dark. We want to do that. I look up at all these books around me, and there's so many. There's so many horror novels that I want to do. Not really anything in the last 10 or 15 years. There's not a lot of. I will say this: I've been writing a horror novel. I just finished a chapter of. It's my horror novel is 24 chapters, and I've been working on it for like the last 4 months. But I'm gonna finish it. It's called Demon Speeding. And I accept that. That's not copywritten. You can't copyright a title. But you'll hear it here first. Demon Speeding is the name of my horror novel. So there you go. But yeah, there's so many horror novels that I would love. There's a horror novel that was called The World on Blood. I don't know if I'd still want to do that now, but it was it was a take on the whole vampires addiction thing. But I love that book, The World on Blood, by Jonathan Nassau. I love that book. So many horror novels. But you know what? They've all been like optioned, or people have... Look, I never thought... I'll tell you the craziest thing. Nobody talks about this. But I have a book called Brand New Cherry Flavor. And I have a hardcover. I bought it when it first came out. They adapted that book into a series. I don't know if anybody saw it. But I was like, no one will ever adapt brand new Cherry Flavor into a series. I was wrong. House of Leaves, and while it's not really a horror novel, but I love it. Where is the adaptation of Donna Tartt's The Secret History? Where is that? How has nobody made Donna Tartt's The Secret History into a movie, or it shouldn't be a movie, a streaming series? How is that not? When I was doing my AI album, one of the songs that didn't make the album was the AI song that I made for The Secret History. What that says about me, I don't know. Billy D. Shillum says, I was 8 for Return of the Jedi. Ewoks were disappointing. They were. So I got some letters. Shall I read some letters? So I got some letters to read. This one... Oh, I can't. That's part of a series of letters that I was sent by SB, which I've pulled out, but I don't know if I have time to read those now. So let's go to let's see what I can find here. This letter comes from Terrell Williams. Terrell Williams wrote this on May 26th. Morning, Rob. I hope you had a super spectacular Memorial Day holiday weekend. I can't believe it's over already. Everything in my world is just fine, thanks, and I hope it stays that way. Before I go any further, I would like to take the opportunity to finally squash this ongoing fun debate amongst Trekkies as to how Khan recognizes Chekhov in 1982's brilliant sequel, Star Trek: The Vengeance of Khan. That's what the film should have been called, by the way. It was called that for the longest time until George Lucas asked them to change the title. They changed it to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan instead of The Vengeance of Khan because Return of the Jedi was going to be called Revenge of the Jedi, and they didn't want any confusion in the marketplace. And look how that turned out. The Vengeance of Khan is a better title. The way I see it, Ensign Chekhov volunteered to assist Khan and his people with Starfleet provisions on SETI Alpha 5. Having been friends with Lieutenant Marla MacGyvers, along with having a tiny romantic crush on her, Chekhov gives her a passionate farewell hug and a kiss on the cheek, thus leaving Marla blushing from ear to ear. Of course, Khan is silently observing his flirty actions with a serious scowl on his face. How dare he kiss my woman? Chekhov gives Khan a dirty look before he beams back on board the Enterprise. Khan faces Marla and partially smiles. The end. This debate is over, folks. No need to thank me. I think that's a little too, you're asking too much, but all right, I'll go with that. My explanation comes is that Chekhov was on the Enterprise when Khan took over in Space Seed. He just hadn't been promoted to the bridge crew yet, and Khan memorized the ship's complement when he was convalescing in sickbay, and he did that because he needed to know who could help him run the starship. That's how he never forgot a face. Terrell goes on to say, I really enjoyed your Robservations episode 1100 and was encouraged to write this letter. I first saw Star Wars in June of 1977. Leaving the theater, my 10-year-old imagination was completely blown away, and I wanted more. The film changed the Hollywood game. 1980 comes along, and oh my God, here comes The Empire Strikes Back, and age 13, I was in science fiction heaven. Rumors of the final cinematic installment were everywhere in 83. I mean, the excitement was huge. How on earth was this saga going to end? I agreed with you 100%, Rob. Return of the Jedi was a big disappointment. Boba Fett was totally disrespected. Another Death Star? Where did that come from? And don't get me started about those Care Bears. Ewoks. Luke's final duel with Vader was epic, but that's it. I personally wanted to see a climactic battle with Luke and Leia powered by the Force swinging lightsabers against Darth Vader and the Emperor. Yes, that should on Coruscant. That's what I wanted. I also wanted to see a showdown between Han Solo and Boba Fett. None of those things ever happened. And as Jedi rolled its final end credits, I thought, game over. In my opinion, there are only 2 Star Wars films, Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. The movies and TV shows via Disney Plus that came after Jedi are just average and somewhat uninteresting. In simple terms, they're not my Star Wars, and it's frustrating because I know what they can do better. Can Star Wars be fixed, thus returning to its mighty glory days of yesteryear? Yes, but it's going to take some time. Unfortunately, once sinister corporations get involved with these cherished IPs, they make bad strategic business decisions that systematically flush a once A-plus cinematic franchise down the fantasy toilet. My God, look what they did to Star Trek. The time has come for someone else to take control. The saga that once started in a galaxy far, far away needs something shiny and new. Bring something that we haven't seen to the imaginational table. I would love to see a Lando Calrissian and Lieutenant Uhura action film masterfully directed by Ryan Coogler, but that ain't never going to happen. It'd be awesome, though. Lastly, I would hate to see George Lucas's creation fall into the category of, in 100 years, no one will even care. Next year is Star Wars' 50th anniversary. It will be interesting to see how it is celebrated. Take care, Rob, and thanks for reading my letter. Well, Terrell, great letter. And of course, I can't argue, with your cogent reasoning. And I don't think that you are wrong. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. Other than I've been saying a lot of it on the show. Do I say more? Do I say less? Hard to say. So yeah, I don't know what to say, but yeah, hope springs eternal. Entertainment is entertainment, and I hope it gets better. I really do. I think, DUI Champ says, just checking, did you read the fan letters yet? I sent a Star Trek one last week. I know. I know. This is interesting, but I will get to yours, I promise. You know what? Billy D. Shillams, I already read that, said he was 8. Millie61652 says, isn't it a little weird how all the leads for Star Wars are 40 and 50 plus actors and characters compared to a series like Dune with 2 young leads? Well, to be fair, I mean, Dune was based on novels, and there are Chani and Paul do age up in the series a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think Star Wars, remember, started out one way. And you had a young boy, Mark Hamill, you had an older guy in Han Solo, and then you had Obi-Wan Kenobi. So Star Wars is always, Star Wars it started out as a series about kind of adults or people that wanted to become adults. So, yeah. But anyway, you know what? I think I'm going to end this show now because it's past midnight. It's past my bedtime. Actually, I'm tired. And I got a little work to do before I get up in the morning. And we're going to do the John Campea show, of course. So, yeah, I think I'll end that. And, yeah. So I want to thank you all for being here. I don't think I'll do a Star Wars show for another long time. But what do you guys think? The commentary and feedback on these last Star Wars shows has been great. But in the end, can corporate owned IPs ever be really good. And look, a lot of Star Wars fans don't like Andor. And I get it, because their Star Wars is lightsabers and Jedi and all that. But even Star Wars, when it began, the Jedi and lightsabers, they were on the periphery, and when Kenobi and Vader fight, you're watching the last of an ancient religion burn itself out, or so it's appeared. And you had one guy, when Vader was gone, Luke was the last Jedi. And, wouldn't it have been great if that's how the sequel trilogy started, with a movie called The Last Jedi, and it was about how is Luke keeping it all together? How is he keeping the Jedi Order together that he started? How is he keeping the New Republic together when all of these forces were conspiring against him? The Jedi, are they supposed to be politicians? And he had to be all things to all people. And the central focus would have been, that's what happens when you get older. The weight of the world is on your shoulders. And if he had kids and if he was married, if Mara Jade was in it, that would have been, how cool would it have been if after Return of the Jedi, the next movie was called The Last Jedi, because that's what Luke was. And it was incumbent upon him to bring it all back, to bring back the Republic, and what ended up happening was the story, the through line, because it is the Skywalker saga, it would have been the story of Luke. Luke, now that he had become a Jedi, what does that mean? And you would have had 3 movies following Luke's ascendancy, and then you could still play all those things. Ben Solo could have been in it and turned into Kylo Ren. You do all that stuff. But it would have started with all of our characters 20 years on, and the fledgling New Republic is still fledgling. It could have been that way. 10 minutes. If they just said, if you went to a board meeting, at Disney, you could have said, okay, guys, we're going to spend the next 5 days after lunch. We're all going to get together and sit in a room, and we're all going to brainstorm ideas, throwing everything out. We'll have filmmakers come in, and we'll talk about Star Wars, and we're gonna allow these creative sessions to percolate and come up with something. And then we're going to figure out what we're going to do. We'll hire 3 directors and figure it all out. But, oh well. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips. Remember, you can go to Find Your Niche on eBay and look for R&B's Imagination Connoisseurs substore. And there is some incredible movie poster memorabilia. It's all real. It's all uncirculated from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And we are dropping Bond posters this week, James Bond posters this week, to celebrate the release of the James Bond First Light video game. There's some incredible stuff. There's a 6-sheet of Live and Let Die and Diamonds Are Forever, which is those the Live and Let Die posters, amazing. And there's a Diamonds Are Forever 3-sheet. There's a lot of 1-sheets. There's some incredible Bond stuff, lobby cards, inserts, half sheets, amazing stuff. So if you're interested in Bond, and of course the Star Wars auctions are going on right now. Horror went up. Those auctions are over. Some great stuff was had by a lot of people. Next week we do fantasy. Then we're doing Hitchcock. We're adding stuff all summer long. It's the most incredible collection of movie poster stuff I've ever seen, and you're going to be surprised at what stuff you see there. So check that out if you want. And just, if you don't want to buy anything, don't buy anything, but you can look through it because there's a lot of weird film history in there. There's some movies that we're going to put up that I've never even heard of before, which is crazy. But anyway, thanks to my moderating staff for doing and being great moderators. And every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And I've got something else that I think I'm going to start adding, a catchphrase that I'm going to start adding to the end of every show. And that catchphrase is, and remember too, there is always more fun to be had. And on that note, I say to everyone, have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.